Honored to have you here for this this meeting. You know, taxes are important, and I think this fiscal policy and the taxes that we have in this state are some of the most important thing that we need to deal with to ensure economic growth. You know, as an employer and a business guy in this state, jobs and economic growth are probably the most important thing that we can work on. To kind of get this started off, Matt Morrow is the president of our chamber here, and Matt is out of town today too. He's actually headed to Boise, Idaho, which I'm sure is much cooler and nicer. But we have a very short video that Matt put together, a couple minutes that we're going to show real quick first. And after that's over, then we're going to turn this over to the director of Missouri Department of Revenue, Joel Walters, who's the chair of the committee. So.
Hello and welcome to the Springfield area chamber. It's truly an honor to have you here today for a hearing on such an important topic. I regret that I can't be with you today. I'm currently on my way to Boise, Idaho for a previously planned trip in preparation for our community leadership visit this fall. The goal of that trip each year is to learn how we can improve our community, be more competitive, and become a world-class city. And in many ways, I know that's your goal at the state level as well. You're looking at how to make Missouri best in class when it comes to competitiveness. And you have some tough decisions ahead of you because the challenges we face as a state are complex, and so will be the answers. One of the key areas for the Chamber's work each day is economic development. In other words, helping create jobs. We do everything we can to attract new companies and jobs to the region, and we work every day with existing companies that are looking to expand. We believe there is almost no issue that can't be addressed with access to a good job. Unfortunately, job growth, attraction, and expansion isn't as simple as any of us would like it to be. Competition is fierce. Existing companies compete with each other and even with other locations in their own businesses for new jobs. And we compete with other states when making the pitch to businesses looking for where they will make their next economic investment. Finding that balance between revenue creation and responsible stewardship of taxpayer money is no easy task. But as you do your work, we encourage you to try to find the sweet spot. We can keep taxes reasonable and competitive while acknowledging that there are vital services that deserve our investment, whether that's transportation infrastructure, education and workforce development, or economic development programs that help grow good jobs for everyone. Again, thank you for your service on this important committee, for your willingness to hear public testimony and gather additional insight, and for the work you're doing to evaluate how to move our state forward. It's a privilege to host you today, and best of luck for a productive session.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joel Walters. As mentioned, I am the Director of Revenue. I got to tell you, that was fantastic. that was dead on. I mean, before joining the state of Missouri in this role, I spent the previous 35 years sort of on the other side of the table in business and advisory, and this topic of competing for investment dollars to grow economic activity, grow jobs, it couldn't have been said any better than that video. That was really fantastic. If I can have a copy of that, I would really love to take that with and take that back. Welcome, everybody. Springfield definitely wins the prize for the most people coming to the town hall meeting of the 4 cities that we have this in. So congratulations on that. This is very impressive, and really pleased that so many of you are here. I'm the chairman of the committee, as mentioned. I'm joined by the vice chair, Will Scharf, who's the director of policy in the governor's office, working for the governor, and Representative Barnes and Representative Rader. I'll let them in a minute make a comment if they want to make a comment before we get started. But I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk about what we're doing here, and then mention a couple of logistic points before we get started. In terms of what we're doing, the governor's executive order asked us to look at 4 things, and that was to compare Missouri's tax credit programs and its tax rates to those of its peer states, to assess the economic impact of the existing state tax credit programs, to assess the possibility of financing cuts to overall state tax rates with cuts to tax credit programs, and recommend comprehensive tax reform legislation to the governor no later than June 30, 2017. And those 4 things are things that we have absolutely been focused on as a committee since we began this process. But we've also agreed as a committee that we're thinking about more than that. We're actually thinking about exactly what was talked about in that video. How do we become best in class in terms of the tax environment for businesses to come here, to grow jobs, and how does that fit together with all the other important factors that are taken into account: skilled workforce, infrastructure, regulatory environment. So we are looking to think about the recommendations that we can make that will completely transform the environment in the state of Missouri from a tax policy perspective, to make it simpler, to make it fairer, to make it lower, but also to make it more competitive and make it someplace that business wants to come and wants to grow. And that's what we've been about, and that's what we intend to report back on the 30th of June. Actually, why don't I see if any of my fellow committee members have a comment, and then we'll talk a little bit about logistics. Sure.
Just really briefly, my name's Will Scharf. As Joel said, I'm the Governor's Policy Director. It's great to be back in Springfield. It's great to see my good friend Peyton Andrews, who we used to work together. She's now apparently with the Springfield Chamber, doing great work down here. I see Senator Krause just joined us. He's currently on active orders, but it's great to have you here, sir. And I've also been informed that Representative Elijah Haar, who's local to the area, he's been detained, but he'll be along in a little bit. So. Thanks for having us. Great to be here, and looking forward to hearing what your community has to say about these important issues that we're looking at.
I'm Representative Holly Rader. Thank you all so much for having us, hosting us, and having such an excellent turnout. As a business owner who does business in 7 to 8 states every day, Missouri's tax climate is very important to me, as I know it is to many of you. So thank you all for showing up to talk about this important topic.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started because we're really here to hear from you. And I will say that this is our 4th town hall meeting, so we are well over several hundred, I would presume, citizens of the state of Missouri that we will have heard speak on this topic. We've also been having weekly meetings in Jefferson City and had a number of subject matter experts come and testify, so we've been doing a lot of listening for the last few months and want to get back to listening again tonight. Logistics, because there is a significant group tonight and we unfortunately have a hard stop at 6 o'clock in the facility, we're going to be pretty tight and we're going to be pretty aggressive on time. So we're going to have two things that we're going to try to do. One is we're going to have to limit everyone to 2 minutes. So come, say what you have to say. We also will be more than happy either tonight or after tonight to get your written comments. That will absolutely read that, but a couple minutes for each person. And then secondly, we've had some people at several of the town hall meetings who have already spoken. We're going to ask that only we start with people who hadn't had a chance to speak at any of the 3 previous town hall meetings. If we have time, we'll certainly hear from the people who have spoken before, but want to make sure we get the opportunity to hear from as many people as we can. We've got the sign-up sheet, and our secretary, Brian Bear, is going to read off who has signed up. We're going to go through in order, and again, please, if you've spoken before, let someone else go, and then we'll come back to you. Mr. Bear.
May we have Mayor McClure, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I am Ken McClure, Mayor of Springfield, and I am delighted to welcome you to Springfield. And I will speak just very briefly regarding our support for various economic development tools that we use here in Springfield to stimulate our employment, to leverage our private investments, and to incentivize our redevelopment of historic properties and increase affordable housing stock for our citizens. We have used the Historic Tax Credit Program as an essential part of our success in downtown Springfield. We have a vibrant downtown, and it's a significant factor in attracting and retaining our young workers. Our city's success with the tax credits in the historic area include our HERS building downtown, which sat vacant for over 20 years before being redeveloped into market rate apartments and lofts, with the first floor business office employing 70 full-time staff members. Brick City is another transformational historic tax credit project that converted a cluster of century-old industrial facilities into a modern office building, housing marketing, housing tech firms, and classroom space for Missouri State University's art and design program. Second, on housing tax credits, the Springfield City is highly engaged and supportive of all efforts to improve our affordable housing stock within the city. The data that we have is real, and we know that the need is real, and so thus we're asking that the state retain the existing housing tax credits and even search for new creative ways to help all communities improve their housing stock. Let me visit with you very briefly about Missouri Works. Missouri Works is our #1 incentive tool for both expansion and retention. It helps our businesses access capital through withholdings or tax credits and to embark on facility expansion and create jobs. We have used that in many ways. We have worked with 3M for over 8 years to expand in Springfield instead of one of the other locations that they have. It wasn't the only thing that made the difference, but offering 3M $5 million in local tax abatement, $1.6 million in tax credits through Missouri Works made the difference. It was an incentive tool that we used. We used it also with Kraft Heinz, O'Reilly Auto Parts, SRC Logistics, JRI Industries, Vital Farms, and Asynchrony Labs in Springfield just within the last 18 months. So these are significant. Let me finally ask that you consider the need for a streamlined sales tax in Missouri. Online retailers do not have to pay taxes on sales to Missourians if they do not have a physical presence in the state. And this puts our brick and mortar businesses at risk. We feel the impact locally. Just within the last few months, Staples, MC Sports, 2 Kmart stores have closed their brick and mortar facilities, and those jobs have been lost. So the loss of the sales tax revenue could impact our key reduction in services for fire, for police, for public works, economic development, and transportation infrastructure. The online contributors are not contributing to the overall community good. We would ask that you carefully weigh that. So our suggestion is that the state do adopt a streamlined sales tax just as 24 other states have done. Acting on this would level the playing field and provide for the necessary delivery of vital services. So in closing, let me say I know you have difficult decisions. During my service as Chief of Staff for Governor Blunt, we also had to make difficult choices, and I know it is a painful process. I've been there. But I know that you will weigh all of these very carefully, that you will seek to find the very correct balance, the best balance in the role that we have for the state to play. I want to assure you that my colleagues on City Council and I are committed to provide you the support that you need as you weigh those priorities. So thank you for your time, and welcome to Springfield.
Thank you very much. One question. Let me ask you a hypothetical question. I understand your support for all of those programs. Given the choice between Missouri Works and you listed the Bowlings of the world, the IBMs of the world, get Missouri Works, or the elimination of Missouri Works in exchange for the elimination of the corporate income tax, which do you think would be better for Missouri?
I would keep Missouri Works.
So that it's available to the bigs.
Correct.
But the littles.
We have made very good use of that with employers of all sizes. So I would submit that that is a better use.
There are requirements for jobs.
Yes, there are. That's correct.
And you have to be a pretty large employer to qualify for Missouri Works.
Yes, but we've had good success with that. And again, I think that is a better trade-off than eliminating the corporate income tax.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jerry Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jerry Lee. I am currently the board president for Springfield Public Schools and also a member of the Missouri School Board Association Board of Directors. MSBA supports the effort to examine Missouri's tax structure in order to provide an equitable and adequate system of services necessary to support the needs of children. We also believe that Missouri needs to fulfill the promises we made to our kids of an education that will prepare them for their future and not our past. We greatly appreciate the General Assembly's fully funding the formula this last session. I think that's a bold move, it's a strong step by the General Assembly. It shows your commitment to our kids' future. and appreciate that. However, we are concerned about the ability of the state to maintain full funding for the formula and other critical services for children due to tax cuts enacted by the General Assembly in recent years that have negatively impacted Missouri's general revenue. We urge the committee to refrain from recommending tax policies that will further deplete revenue that's necessary to fund critical services for Missouri's children. We also strongly support an examination of the various tax credit programs in Missouri that have eroded revenue over the last few years. I think it's important to note that public services that are dependent on tax revenue are interrelated. Public education doesn't live in a vacuum. If reduced revenue results in poor roads, that hurts the ability of school districts to safely transport kids to and from school. If we reduce revenue and cuts to social services, the Children's Division will not be able to respond to school districts concerned about educational neglect of students, child abuse, physical abuse, things like that. Funding is reduced for law enforcement, response times suffer. So communities dependent on state funding for necessary and essential services. Communities depend on state funding for necessary and essential services of children. And those services are in jeopardy when the state revenue is reduced. We believe development and implementation of a tax structure that will allow the state to meet its obligations to fund essential services for children is critical to the success of our school and the future of our state. I thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback to this committee as you move forward with your difficult task ahead. So.
I assume when you talk about revenue.
We don't hear you that well.
All right. Sure.
Can you turn the volume up?
Yes, we will.
You can definitely hear that. Can you hear this?
That's better.
Senator Kraus can come up here, I think. No. Okay, not in uniform. Okay. I assume, and I don't mean to pick on you, but we've heard this in other venues about revenues, and in most other venues, you didn't state this, but in most other venues, they've been referring to Senate Bill 509. Is that, because here's the problem with that analysis, is Senate Bill 509 hasn't taken effect. And so Senate Bill 509, to the extent that's a criticism, it's not Senate Bill 509. And, you know, I see some folks in the crowd who are in Jeff City a lot, and you're up there a lot, but not always. The types of revenue, so other than Senate Bill 509, I see small revenue reduction bills that I've consistently voted against. But I haven't seen the education community come out against bills that have a $6 million fiscal note on taxes. Do you think that in years to come, the education community should take an approach that says whittling away at the tax base $6 million at a time is something that should be opposed?
Well, the bottom line is maintaining the funding of the education program. I mean, I'm gonna separate myself from a tax policy standpoint. There are things from a personal standpoint I think we ought to be looking at significantly. From an education standpoint, I think as long as we don't erode the tax revenue available so that we can fully fund the critical needs of our kids, then, you know, whether it's $6 million or Senate Bill 509 or whatever it is, I think that's important for us to be vigilant in maintaining that. And you know, that's options that you all as General Assembly weigh as how do we maintain that fully funding of the formula and balance the other things of jobs, which we support jobs. Obviously, that's good for us. That's good for schools, whether it's kids or it's revenue and tax base.
Is it fair to say that if we find a path that attempts the best we can to be revenue neutral, but understanding that we're going to have to forecast things and we may be off a little bit here or there, but that creates a more efficient tax system to create incentives for job creation, as long as it's revenue neutral, that's something that you would support?
Yes, I don't have a problem with something like that would continue to fund the education balance structure-wise, that would maintain the funding of those needs.
Thank you.
Rusty Worley.
Thank you very much.
Good evening
Good afternoon. Welcome to downtown Springfield. We're glad to have you here today, and we're appreciative of your listening to our stories and also seeing firsthand the rebirth of our urban core. My name is Rusty Worley. I'm the Executive Director of the Downtown Springfield Association. We represent 125 businesses and downtown advocates. DSA has been in existence since 1965, and over our 51-year history, we have seen the past 20 years spur the renaissance you see here today. Brian Fogel, the president of our Community Foundation of the Ozarks, Brian has quoted that downtown's an overnight 20-year success story. And through that, the seeds that were planted in the late 90s have germinated and taken root here in the last decade. When asked about the key drivers for downtown Springfield, our community leaders point to three things. One, Vision 2020, where the community made a priority of the future of downtown in the late 90s. The university investments in Center City across OTC, Missouri State, and Drury. And then finally, historic tax credits. When you look at the numbers for the Springfield's use of historic tax credits, it's impressive. Since 1998, 129 projects have utilized the program, $41 million in tax credits, and that has spurred $227 million in private investment. However, those millions of dollars only tell part of the story. You can get lost in those numbers after a while. DSA would like to highlight 10 local businesses who chose to come downtown because they were drawn to the authenticity and the character of the historic buildings that we have. These businesses are in buildings that would only have been renovated through state historic tax credits. And I have more detailed descriptions, but I've limited those due to time constraints. The Coffee Ethic, Viridian Event Center, Norman's Bridal, Gailey's Breakfast Cafe, Hotel Vandervoort, Aviary Cafe, Druff's, Dapper, European Cafe, Anvil. That eclectic group of businesses are only here because of the historic tax credits. And they represent that those tax credits are more than dollars. They're the blood and the sweat of small businesses. Intrinsic historic tax credits also attract quality professional jobs. Intrinsic consolidated 4 offices from around the country into the first floor of the Hearst building on the square. It now has 100 jobs with an average wage of $60,000, which is significant for Springfield. Architecture, design, other professional services continue to expand rapidly in downtown, and they're represented in buildings that have utilized historic tax credits. Those include Butler Rosenberry, Dake Wells, Casey & Associates, Pension Consultants, Conco, and Marlin. Note this doesn't include the Idea Commons in Missouri State, with the Jordan Valley Innovation Center, the E-Factory, and the academic programs in Brick City. Through these private and public partnerships, Forbes magazine recently recognized Springfield as one of the 7 cities you didn't expect to be great for business. Finally, historic tax credits draw new residents who choose a walkable urban lifestyle. Over 800 new loft units have been developed over the last 15 years, resulting in 1,200 new residents who bring vibrancy to the sidewalks that were previously desolate on nights and weekends. Without historic tax credits, downtown would not have drawn these new investments and would have continued on its path to the forlorn ghost town that it was in the late 80s and early 90s. There remain several notable projects that would benefit from the use of historic tax credits. DSA strongly urges the committee to preserve the core elements of the program and not lose the valuable momentum so Missouri can continue to yield the dividends of small businesses, professional jobs, and more sustainable housing. DSA appreciates your coming to Springfield to see our progress, and we look forward to continuing to work with the state to foster the next generation of overnight success stories through the use of important economic development tools like historic tax credits.
One question I'd like to ask, and I guess the question that often occurs to me as I'm hearing sort of very similar stories at other town halls is kind of is there any diminishing return? And what I mean by that is sort of every speaker says that every historic building would not have been renovated without the credit. That feels like a stretch. It feels like there are potentially things that would have made business sense. There would have been a business case to do them. But even taking it at the word that, you know, at the start in the 90s, as you start the rejuvenation, you needed some sort of incentive to get that going. But then you mentioned the word momentum. And it occurs to me that at some point when you're saying you've got this momentum, you're being written up in national newspapers, people are moving to the city center, it's vibrant, it's really moving, there's 2 more buildings we need to do for historical renovation and we need credits to do that. It feels like there's got to be some point at which there's a diminishing return that you need the credits because everything you describe must be daily enhancing the business case of doing those last 2 buildings without the credits. And it just feels like it can't be the case that to the last building it wouldn't be done without the credits. I'm just curious your reaction to that.
Well, with any successful team or program, you need to be clicking on all cylinders, and this has been a valuable part of the formula for downtown development here in Springfield and across the state. So unplugging that important tool sets us back and jeopardizes that momentum. Now, it's an inexact science and art to attracting development. We do have momentum, but I would hate to lose this key tool towards that when it's been so successful. And we know that developing these last projects aren't easy either. It was difficult, but now we face new challenges of zero lot lines and other issues. So it's hard to quantify, but we would maintain that these tools are just as needed today as they were in the past.
Can I ask a related question? Do you think an individual building should be eligible for multiple rounds of tax credit funded historic preservation? So for example, if the Vandervoort Hotel were sold on to a new buyer in 5 years and they wanted to re-renovate the building, do you think that sort of development should be tax credit eligible?
There should be reasonable parameters placed on those so there's not significant overlap. But the Vandervoort is an example where it is a building that's had over 100 or almost 100-year life, and it's had distinct uses over that 100 years. It was originally a Masonic lodge. It was an office building. Now it's one of the top boutique hotels in the country. And so through that, each use, as long as it's distinct and has a sustainable life, I think should stand alone and be looked at. But certainly there's a reasonable time period where you wouldn't want to, 5 years is very early to do that. When looking at the difference between its office building use and this boutique hotel, there was 25 to 30 years, which I think was the useful life of that particular intended use.
I think we have to call it there in terms of time. Thank you very much.
Jim Moody?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jim Moody. I am a registered lobbyist in Jefferson City, but I am appearing on my own behalf today and not representing any clients. By way of background, I was Governor Ashcroft's from 1987 to 1992, state budget director and then head of the Office of Administration. I have sent to your staff a longer presentation, and I'm just going to cover a few things today in the interest of brevity. Yeah, I'm sorry. I did not collate them. I kept them separate.
The committee is baffled.
That was not my intent, Mr. Chairman. Okay, the first slide, which says the narrowing general revenue tax base. I simply went back to a 1991, fiscal year 1991 budget book I had in my office, and it had struck me over time that the tax base is narrowed. That when I was in the budget office, 48% of our taxes came from individual income, about 32% from sales tax, and 8.4% from corporate income and franchise, and then 7.2% from other sources. Today, nearly 70% is individual income tax, 23% sales tax, 3.2% corporate income franchise and dropping, and all other has dropped to 0.9%. So we're 70% individual income tax, and we have enacted legislation that has not yet gone into place that's going to cut that resource by 5 times in 5 different steps. So, and I think your efforts are going to be focused on the same source, and I would just point out to you that's your biggest source.
Okay, the all other from 7.2 down to 0.9, what was eliminated in that?
I believe that is probably the motor vehicle motor vehicle sales tax, which in 2004, half of the motor vehicle sales tax used to go to general revenue and half of it went to Mo.gov, and the voters approved giving all of it to Mo.gov. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, that was not in general sales tax, but in other. And then the other thing is many of those taxes there are like the excise taxes, beer, wine, liquor, and they are fixed amount per barrel or whatever, and that fixed amount has never changed.
Oh, I see. If we're drinking the same amount, it's taking up a smaller percentage.
The prices have gone up,
Yeah.
the tax has not gone up. Okay, the second one I've got is, one of my pet peeves is when people say, we haven't changed the tax rate in 100 years or something like that. Because I've been around a while. This is a list of the individual income tax changes that have occurred in roughly the last 20 years. And I would point out that changing the rate is simply one part of a calculation. The other thing that I would point out that you may consider, and this one's a tough one, is the state law says the standard deduction for Missouri income tax is the federal standard deduction. And that goes up. And so if you look at the last, I'm blanking, it's a 2009 report, tax expenditure budget. It would show you that in roughly from 1990 to 2015, that number is, I'm sorry, yes, it's doubled. And so there's been a significant tax expenditure because of the standard deduction. One of the hallmarks of the Trump proposed tax change is to dramatically increase the federal standard deduction. And if Missouri doesn't change the law and Congress does that, it's going to be a huge hit. Anyway, this is just some historical information. Third one, sales tax, essentially the same thing, sales tax changes that have occurred since, this one goes all the way back to 1980, but there's been a fair number of sales tax changes. And then finally, I don't have a slide, but you know, the ramifications of Senate Bill 19 are still being felt, and it was very dramatic. You know, we're probably going to lose somewhere in a couple $100 million because of Senate Bill 19. And if you look at the remittances and declarations for the current tax season, remittances and declarations are down, and I can't, you know, you may have the information, Mr. Director, to figure this out. I certainly don't. But in preparing my own taxes this year, I found out that the allocation also applies to partnerships, which file as individuals. And so part of the reason that, so if you're a partnership in Kansas City and you allocate your income to Kansas, that income is treated as pass-through income, and the tax rate is 0. So you go from 5 point something in Missouri to 0 in Kansas. And I have it from a friend at a firm up there that at least some partnerships did that. So I'm going to stop there, Mr. Chairman.
I'll make two comments. One, the Kansas point is a good point. We're very conscious of some of the changes that Kansas made and understand those and need to think about not just, sort of made mistakes too strong, but having some of the same footfalls that they had in what they did. And so we're very conscious of that. We'll make sure of that. Secondly, we also need to compete with the states that we border on, so we need to take that into account. Secondly, appreciate this because ultimately your point is, again, has been said by others, there is a pie of general revenue that needs to be divided and needs to be attracted, and it's a challenging pie to get at in a number of ways. And so that's right, and it's not unlimited, and difficult choices need to be made on how you get at that, how you divide that up, and how you drive economic activity to hopefully grow that pie. The last point I would make is on your sales tax chart, just to make the challenges even bigger, if you were to cross out the word statutory at the top, you could add a constitutional amendment from last fall related to the ability to expand your sales tax base into the fastest growing part of the economy.
Absolutely.
So
Agree with you.
the pie is challenging.
So I want to ask a question about the portion. Say it's a 200 lawyer law firm with an office in Kansas City proper and then in Leawood.
Yes.
They can apportion their income to Leawood?
Okay, I'm not an accountant, okay? But I talked to accountants about this, and the answer is yes, you can apportion it based on sales.
So you have three options in the Missouri Code. You can do single sales factor, modified single sales factor, the three factor. But if they place capital on the Kansas side of the border, even though all of their income might be coming from Missouri work, they can still apportion some of their revenue to Kansas where they're paying nothing, right?
You can make all the originating fees with one partner in Kansas.
Okay, so
They're lawyers, they're trickers.
lawyers, yeah.
Thank you.
so the partner in Kansas becomes the rainmaker to put a 6% increase on every dime that comes into the office, if they're really thinking ahead here.
Again, that's a question that you would be better to have an accountant answer for you and not me. But yes, I checked with an accountant of a major firm in Kansas City, and that is what I was told.
And there's no new economic activity, right?
No. Now the interesting thing, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'll shut up, is what Kansas did yesterday, which I'm still trying to figure out. I'll be interested to see if any of what has happened before gets equalized. Because my understanding is they took some of the benefits that would make you want to push your income to Kansas, and they reimposed some taxes on them.
They ended the fake LLC exception.
I think that's correct.
That's what, if you can believe the Kansas City Star, what they did at 1 o'clock in the morning was ended the fake LLC exemption.
Which is part of what, as we're discussing here, that's the reason you would want to apportion it over there.
So ultimately, that issue, forgetting about sort of any of the rest of the baggage around the conversation, one of the things we are thinking very carefully around is how business income is taxed in a way that it shouldn't influence your choice of corporation versus partnership versus LLC. And we're gonna think very hard about ways we can do that, because as soon as you distinguish that, which was at the core of what happened there, you start to influence behavior, which doesn't change the economics of the business. And so we are focused on that. We will be thinking about that. But appreciate you bringing that concept up, because it's important to think about that variation, how other states are doing it, and how we get that right.
Mr. Chairman, lastly, I did send a second PowerPoint to your staff that breaks down some of we get from the federal government's tax returns, our Missouri tax returns, federal government data on sources of income from Missouri. And I've done a little bit of analysis. There's also a PowerPoint you have that has
Thank
that.
you very much, and thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
May I ask one more question? Manufacturing sales tax,
Yes.
you have $70 million in the county. That just seems low to me. I mean, we've got a bill 2 years ago that said it was a $1 billion tax bill dealing with the manufacturing sales tax exemption. That
It-
seems dramatically low.
That one is very difficult to track. It was first addressed post the first and second, I think, Southwestern Bell cases in 1998. And I believe I got that number from the tax expenditure budget report prepared by the university. It's either from there or the fiscal note,
What year was that?
1998.
Oh, okay, so.
And so I
1998
did not update
$7
it.
million in 1998 is
Yes.
a heck of a lot more in 2007.
Yes.
Okay.
Brilliant, thank you very much for your comments, really appreciate that, thank you.
Larry Conan?
Not in order.
Larry Conan? Having trouble reading the name. Wanted to speak about veterans benefits? Oh, there you go.
Glad to be here. I'm with the Vietnam Veterans of America Advocacy Group, trying to work with our local Hannah Kelly on 141 for the property tax credit claim. And what we have found is that it's unfair to veterans the way it's written out because of the curve of income. And we were trying to see if we could work with your committee to change some of the terminology so more veterans can receive real property tax exemptions. So this is just to bring forward to see if we can start the process.
Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Okay.
What you mean by the curve and that sort of thing?
Yeah, according to your paperwork, on page 9, section B, it's 100% disabled veteran as a result of military service. But when you go to the paperwork and you fill it out, it says that you got to be total and permanent, basically. Well, we have people that are 100% that is not total and permanent. So they don't get to go into the system. Also, out of all the people that go into the system for this exemption, most don't qualify according to your curve on page 15, 13 through 15. So they're only getting a piece of the pie. So, an example, if a person makes $30,000 a year, he doesn't get any credit. If him and his wife make $34,000, they receive no credits. But if you basically look at a person that's 100% disabled, it does say do not count the veteran's disability check. But most people have, as I say, if you're 100 total, you can go to work, even if they're saying welcome to Walmart. So they would be out of the system. So we're trying to see if we could bring it to a more fair, take the profit, take the money out of it, how much a person makes.
So I'm not familiar with this issue. Unless someone else is the committee is familiar with it, what I'd like to ask is could you leave Mr. Bear your name and phone number? You'll get a call from somebody in the department to understand this better, and then we'll be able to talk, have a better conversation than I feel able to do.
Yeah, this is just to see if we can get something going.
We will give you a call, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gary Powell?
Gary Powell. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Gary Powell. I practice business law here in Springfield, but I'm also the past president of the Springfield Business Development Corporation, which is the economic development arm of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce. And I'm speaking to you today because based on my experience at the SBDC, I, like many of you, learned that economic development just doesn't happen. It's the result of hard work, dedication, perseverance on the part of staff and volunteers of your economic development office in your community. I was privileged to work very closely with the staff and with the volunteers of the SBDC and the Chamber of Commerce here in Springfield in attracting to our community and retaining in our community economic development and the quality jobs that those bring. I think we all know the competition we face in the marketplace in the battle to attract economic development to our communities. I saw how we lost opportunities because other communities outside of Missouri were able to offer greater incentive packages, better and greater incentive packages. I saw situations where we did win the battle in intense competition with another community, even with the smaller incentives that we had available to us, because we were able to bring to the table other factors, such as our workforce, such as our transportation ability. But I truly believe that we would not even have been successful in those endeavors had we not had the incentive packages we had to work with. A very important category for us in attracting business into our community is the job creation tax credits. I think it came up earlier as to whether or not, I think one of the members of the committee talked about our existing corporate tax structure. Would we attract more if we eliminated the corporate tax? Our experience in the SBDC was that our existing corporate tax structure is competitive and that we often did not lose business expansion over that issue. The more important issue was the incentive program, especially job creation tax credits. I truly believe the tax credits do generate a positive return to the state. I think it came up earlier that these tax credits can be triggered for as low as 10 jobs. Admittedly, they're often used with larger employers, but they can be used for as few as 10 jobs. They help create jobs for Missourians. They assist in the training of our citizens with new skills. I do not believe they drain our budget. Our most prominent program, which has been obviously mentioned here before, the Missouri Works programs, the models that at least I'm familiar with indicate they generate $1.40 each year for every dollar the state pays out. The jobs last more than 1 year, so the benefit continues. And after 5 or 6 years of the promised credits, you have 10 years worth of benefit for each job, which generates almost a 4-to-1 return for the state. In the competition among the states for economic development, it would be wonderful if we could have universal incentive disarmament. That would be a wonderful thing to have. But that's not our reality. The reality is that competition between Missouri and other states for attracting and retaining economic development is intense. And we must give our economic development personnel the tools to compete. We already must overcome the substantial incentive programs that other states offer to prospective businesses. I would respectfully ask that your recommendations would include a continued investment in this program, which is reasonable, accountable, and effective. When we get this right, jobs are created, individuals are able to work and have the dignity of work to support themselves and their families. When we get it wrong, opportunities will simply pass our state by, and that job and growth and job creation and the prosperity that it brings will happen in another state. Thank you for your time.
Pat Gartland. Pat Gartland.
Good afternoon. My name is Pat Gartland. I'm the Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Club of Springfield. Welcome to Springfield. We have 4 locations in Springfield, and we serve 2,500 members a year, and another 19,000 youth we serve as well. Our club focuses on at-risk kids. I'm here today to support the NAP and YOP tax credit programs offered by the state of Missouri. These programs encourage local investment from caring donors. In exchange, they receive a 50% tax credit. In my 39 years of service with kids in 3 different states, I have never seen a program that has done so much to support local charities across the state. With the high cost of incarceration, the investment in prevention programs pay large dividends for our community. Our police chief, Paul Williams, wrote an article in the Springfield News Leader recently regarding the importance of after-school programs and the positive effect that it has on reducing juvenile crime. In the last 15 years, the Boys and Girls Clubs of Springfield has built 3 new Boys and Girls Clubs and also conducted a major rehab of a 4th site. Tax credits provided a major incentive to support these projects. Other programs supported by the NAP and YAP are Beyond the Classroom, an academic success program that provides mentoring, career exploration, financial education, STEM program training, leadership, and literacy. Money spent stays in the community, whether it's for capital expenditures, supplies, services, and of course salaries. We have provided several jobs through our building campaigns and have increased the number of our club employees by 25% over the last 7 years, thus strengthening economic development. A very stringent review process is conducted by the Department of Economic Development in order to be a part of the NAP and YLP program. So to this committee, I would encourage you to continue supporting this important program for the citizens of Missouri. Thank you for your consideration. Questions?
Excellent, thank you.
Mobin Khan.
Mobin Khan?
Yeah.
Well, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to convey my thoughts and comments on the state incentive programs. I'm here on behalf of Downtown St. Louis, Inc., which is a public-private partnership focused on economic development of downtown St. Louis, and we also manage a community improvement district with the same objectives. In particular, I wanted to speak for historic tax credits and how it has been sort of a truly instrumental incentive program in terms of revitalizing our downtown and many other communities across the state similar to that. Prior to enactment of this program, as you may know, downtown St. Louis and the city in general had seen consistent decline of decades of job losses, businesses leaving the area, and reduction in economic activity. Since the inception of the program, we have seen a whole number of buildings that have come back online, has been put to use for business, new businesses moving into the area, new residents moving into the area, new jobs being created. One aspect of that in particular that has been really remarkable is how it has helped St. Louis to emerge as one of the startup and innovation destinations across the country, one of the premier destinations. The reason has been the kind of building stock that was not being used before. When it was put back to use, the kind of spaces that were there, the creative, innovative spaces that the startups and the younger workforce liked. And so we've been we have seen that. However, we have made tremendous progress. However, this progress is very fragile. And what I wanted to say here is to strongly encourage this committee to continue supporting that program and continuing that program. One of the members had brought up before sort of the tax revenue neutral programs, and there have been multiple studies assessing the impact of this program in particular. And there was one number that I can mention here, which is that every dollar in credits issued for this, there is, I believe, almost $1.78 that the state gets back. And so I would arguably this would be the best, if not one of the best programs in the toolbox for this. So with that, I'll ask if there are any questions.
One question quick. So in previous discussions, one of the comments that was made was the historic tax credit has worked really well for St. Louis. It's been great. It's now vibrant, it's now growing, and there isn't really that many buildings left that we need to do this with, and the program should replicate those results in other parts of the state. And so just curious your reaction to that comment.
Okay. I don't have the exact statistic, but I would know that I would note that we still have a long way to go, and this sort of goes back to my comment that we have made the progress. There is that momentum. However, it's not irreversible. And if we pull it back prematurely, then it would just completely, whatever investment that have been made so far may go to waste as well. And in terms of the number of projects left, we still have a substantial amount of buildings, both in terms of numbers and in terms of square footage, that are still left and would definitely be relying on a program like this.
Do you see a time when that momentum will take you to a place where there will simply be a sufficient business case for growth in downtown St. Louis without state subsidies through credits? Does that day ever arrive, or is it the next building will always need a state subsidy because there will never be a business case?
Well, I can't forecast as of now. However, in any economic development incentive program, you're always asking about but for this. And at present, we are at that situation that but for this incentive program, those developments and that economic activity would not come to bear.
This is like a chicken and the egg, and it goes with every one of these tax credit programs. You say, but for this program, no investment would exist. But the program exists, so we don't have a test sample for the program not existing under current conditions.
Well, under current conditions, however, 20 years ago, this program did not exist. So the question is, as one of the other members were saying, that when do you stop? And what I would argue is that we're nowhere near there yet.
I would just caution, we're about halfway through time.
Okay.
Quickly.
Just one more quick question. You said before that each dollar in historic preservation tax credits returns, I believe it was $1.78 to the state. Do you think that the only rationale for the historic preservation tax credit is essentially an economic development one? That this promotes economic development, brings new, young, entrepreneurial people in? Because I've heard, former DED Director Mike Downing, for instance, say that he considers any project which scores less than a 2.0 on a REMI analysis to be a bad economic development project. So by that logic, if economic development is in fact the only rationale, it would seem that we're approving a lot of historic projects that probably don't meet the state's usual standards for purely economic development projects.
So I don't know if there is any project that could be qualified as purely economic. However, in this case, for example, when the buildings get revitalized, they revitalize the communities. We have new residents in the place. We have new businesses. We have new visitors that otherwise would not have considered to come into town. So it goes beyond just dollars and cents, in my opinion, and it's basically bringing those communities back to life.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Debbie Schartz-Hart, or Chance-Hart, and then I think also if we do this like baseball, if we could have the next person on deck, I think we'll save some time and get more people. Could we have Annie Bush on deck as well?
Come on down.
Hello. For those confused in the room, I am not Debbie Sean's heart. Debbie was called away unexpectedly and asked if I could step into her place to express her few thoughts that she...
So a pinch hitter to keep you in.
A pinch hitter? That's right. Only if I can be a pinch hitter like with the Royals jersey, though. My name is, in fact, Tammy Creason, and I am an independent housing developer. I do not share the eloquence of Debbie, so I apologize that her speech was not nicely written out, and in fact, I just got some notes here. But I have been a very, very, very avid advocate of this program for the last 20 years. I've had a really unique perspective that I've worked not just as a housing developer, but I've worked with many housing developers, with many syndicators, both in Missouri and throughout the Midwest, national syndicators, and I've worked with communities on economic development, downtown revitalization plans. So I'm really, really, really passionate about this program. I think there's a lot of people here today and probably at your other meetings that have spoke to the benefits of this program, and I think that they're well documented, and I'm sure you guys get the message loud and clear. So instead, Debbie wanted to use her 2 minutes to just bring light to the fact that we understand that these dollars are crucial, and we want to be good stewards as developers and as syndicators and as advocates of low-income housing and workforce housing throughout the state of Missouri, and the critical impact that the state credit has very specifically to rural Missouri. But for that credit, we've seen the impacts of it, and we've seen it illustrated throughout other neighboring states and throughout the states that do not have these state credits, the impact that can happen. And we're very, very, very cautious that we're giving light to that, and that we are becoming part of the solution, and that we're working towards ideas of reform and ideas of change. So the 3 things that very specifically she had noted and wanted to make mention of is that in the 2010 tax committee, similar commission and committee, one of the things that came out of it that we never saw come to fruition was possibly exploring ways to make that tax credit more efficient. You know, we want to be a pathway to making it as efficient as possible. So I think one of the recommendations at that time was to take it from a 10-year credit down to a 5-year credit, which creates a higher yield for investors. It creates greater equity, the same equity for the projects by using less state credits. So we think that that's a good recommendation that was overlooked in past discussions. One of the other things that I don't think has been previously discussed is possibly limiting the use of those state credits in metropolitan areas. One of the things that a neighboring state, Oklahoma, after implementing a similar state housing tax credit, did was limiting the use of those state credits to outstate Oklahoma. So we know that the CRA investment and the equity available, the yield in the AMI's Kansas City, St. Louis are greater, and that in Oklahoma, they limit that you can't use a state credit in those higher AMIs because they already have the benefits that many of the outstate ones don't have. This is an example that I think you can pull up of every state. This is what happens when you don't have a state credit. That this is the state of Kansas. This is the orange dots are the housing tax credit projects. So you can see Kansas City, Wichita, Topeka, and the rest of the state becomes untouched, because without that tax credit, we just can't build affordable units that are viable for people to live in, that they can't afford the rent. And even in Springfield, we did a study of 1 or 2 of the projects, and while the credit allows, a 60% AMI, 71% of our residents are actually at 50% or lower. That's in Springfield, Missouri, which is considered a metropolitan area. When you start going outside of that to neighboring counties and to outstate, that number starts, exponentially growing and increasing. So looking at creative ways to use that state credit to make it efficient by limiting it. And then lastly, we still feel really strongly that we aren't being effective efficiently using that. The elimination of prevailing wages, the elimination of trying to use this housing credit program to create additional initiatives greatly increases the cost of this. Prevailing wages increased it more than 30%. We lost 30% of the units that were being generated in the state of Missouri when we implemented that. Additionally, MBE, WBE initiatives. I am a WBE. I get the impact of it. But as an advocate of the credit in the program, my greatest passion is helping affordable housing throughout the state. And so we just wanted to go on record and challenge you guys to look at the alternatives that are out there, talk to some of the people in the industry. There's many, many, many developers that I know have put hard thinking hats on and discussing this with syndicators nationally and ways of making it more efficient. And we would love to engage any discussions on that anybody was interested in having.
Very clear.
Thank you very much.
And then can we have Patty Miller on deck, please? And we have a place to sit right over here for you as well.
Mr. Chairman, Commission, I'm happy to be here. I am Annie Bush. I'm a nobody.
I have no skin in any of the game. I'm a retired city county librarian, but for the last 8 years, I've been working with homeless issues and working with the agencies that help the homeless. I have 2 things primarily to tell you. Number 1, taxes are not evil, okay? Taxes are a part of being a citizen of our state and of our nation, to pay what it takes to pay for the infrastructure, education, and other issues that make our state livable. So number 1, can we stop demonizing taxes? I would just ask you that. As a patriotic person, we have a responsibility to do what it takes to take care of our citizens. Taxes have been cut, guys. 20 times in the last 20 years, taxes have been cut. So I would ask you, when is it enough? When is it enough? I guess you guys think perhaps that getting rid of all corporate taxes is okay, but somebody has to pay for it, and guess who that is? That's the working class, the people working hard. And as we know from research, wages have been stagnant over the last, since 40 years. Not only are wages stagnant, but we no longer have benefits. Medicare, or health care, retirement programs no longer automatically go along with the job. We have people making wages, working full-time, that can't afford a living. So what's happening, you can get rid of corporate taxes, but you have workers paying taxes who are making less and less. And at what point does the state go bankrupt? And if we can't take care of our infrastructure, roads and bridges. The people did not vote down a gas tax. They voted down a sales tax for gasoline. If you can't pass a gas tax in this environment when gas is cheaper than it ever has been in decades, and it's approved by the trucking companies and the service agencies, gas companies, when can you pass it? We've got to take care of our infrastructure. We have to. Companies may give them lots of taxes to come here, but unless there's a decent infrastructure, roads and bridges are essential. Education is essential. We've been talking about the payback for tax credits. Do you know what the biggest payback is? Early childhood education. For every $1 spent, a $7 return, not $1.50, a $7 return on investment. Are we doing it? No. We've known for at least 4 decades that early childhood education makes for better citizens, better workers, a more productive, educated workforce, and fewer people that are inclined to be off the scale and getting government benefits. That's facts, folks. That's research. We're not doing that. If you don't have enough money, again, to take care of the health care, to take care of affordable housing, you're getting winners and losers. Do you know that because John Q. Hammond's company and Home Depot, Toys R Us don't pay state taxes? Lowe's does, Target does. Do you even know that? You know why? Because they have a mailbox in Delaware. Now there's an easy thing to take care of. Why should Home Depot get a better deal than Lowe's? Why should Toys R Us get a better deal than Target? What does that generate? What economic development does that generate? So my second point is, 1 is taxes are not evil. Number 2 is, don't rush this through. Taxes are a complex issue. There are some simple things I will quickly tell you about, but when somebody making $9,000 in this state pays the same tax rate as a multimillionaire, something's wrong. The highest tax rate goes to somebody making as little as $9,000. Anybody think that's a good idea? That's money that comes out of their pocket that they could be spending in the local economy. Isn't that what we want? If 70 to 80% of our economy is driven by consumer spending, if people don't have money to spend, the economy is not going to improve. So, okay, you want to give incentives to businesses, fine. Are they bringing jobs to our area that pay a livable wage? Are they paying less than a livable wage? And are those individuals living off government support that's no longer there? And keep in mind that right now the federal government is looking to cut money that goes to the states. We know that, right? We just saw today that the Kansas legislature overrode the veto of the governor. They're going to raise taxes in Kansas because it didn't work. At some point, taxes cuts do not work. Kansas spent that out. So we've got to be smart. And yes, we have to compete with other states, but we don't want to commit suicide. And we have residents who need affordable housing. Right now, there's a group of agencies working with the homeless camp up in northeast Springfield. Over 120 people have been through this. Are you watching my time? Have been through this. Out of that 120 people, only 15 to 20 have housing. But we're spending money sending the homeless from one side of town to the other because there's no place for them to go. And most of them had mental health care issues, and we have to fund mental health. So you can pay it up front, or you can pay a whole lot more later, and what we're doing is paying a whole lot more later. They're in jail, they're in emergency rooms, and they're on government welfare because we're not taking the care up front. Early childhood education, mental health care, physical care, those things. Take care of those things, and yes, then you can bring taxes down because we're not going back and fixing things that we should have fixed to begin with. And I will leave it at that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Very good thoughts, thank you.
Patty Miller, and can we have Zachary Carroll on deck, please?
Good evening. It's not easy to follow the passion of Annie Bush, but I will give it my best. I represent the Missouri State Alliance of YMCAs here in Missouri, representing all 25 associations. We provide health and wellness services in over 70 communities and community outreach services in over 800 sites, including schools, child care facilities, and other facilities across the state. Want to talk to you just a minute about the neighborhood assistance and the YOP tax credits, as well as the charitable tax deduction program. I do have some written testimony I will leave with you, and it will provide some stories around the impact of both of the tax credit programs around the state, many of which are in small communities. Some of those are documented, and to be responsive to the comments and the support for local investment in local communities. Some examples that we have are tax credit programs and contributions that are less than 25% of the project. In Jefferson City a couple of years ago, we did a project that received $250,000 of tax credits. The project was over a $12 million project, created 11 or more jobs that are existing today and growing. So we feel like we're good fiscal stewards of that project. It is not, as the gentleman stated from Boys and Girls Club, it is not an easy process. It is tenuous. The state staff does a great job of making sure projects are viable, that projects are good community projects. Oftentimes our projects have utilized and renovated buildings that have been vacant for 2 years or more. Our boards are locally based and driven from local need, and so I think that we are good fiscal stewards of that program. Those are strong community-based, multi-partner projects, and I would ask that for your support and continued support of both of those. Those stories will be in the packet. The second item I want to discuss is the charitable tax status. Communities and residents served by Missouri's YMCAs across the state benefit from the charitable tax status. YMCAs across Missouri serve over 400,000 Missourians each year. We offer over $13 million in financial assistance to children, to families, and adults each year as well. We are volunteer-led, mission-driven charitable organizations and believe that we earn our tax status every day through the multiple services we provide in local communities, both urban, rural, geographically spread throughout the state of Missouri. A few things I will leave you with. YMCAs are the largest provider of child care in the state. much of which is subsidized. We have over 250,000 children in our child care services each year. We work on reading, maintaining reading levels. We do enrichment. We do STEM projects throughout the summer and in after-school programs. We do target at-risk kids. Another point to note is that Missouri now has the 10th highest obesity level in our country. YMCAs are leading community-based networks to work on our community health issues, and certainly are targeting chronic disease through diabetes prevention programs, which are highly successful, recently CDC funded and approved. The final thing I will leave you, the YMCA is over 178 years old. We have been responsive to our community needs for that long. If you look back through our history, we have served in the military, we've gone through housing. We truly reflect the need of the community, and that's because we're governed by community-based boards. Every YMCA will look differently, and that is, again, because we're reflective of our community. So we appreciate your support. We are not alone in our reliance on charitable tax status, and so we would just ask, as you consider tax reform, that you uplift the nonprofits and the local work that we do each and every day. And if there's any way that we can help you as you serve our citizens, we'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Zachary Carroll and Madison Carroll, John Reynolds, are you all testifying as a group?
We were going to do it separately. We all have
For
statements,
time?
but we can condense
Can we do
statements.
it as a group, just for time?
Yeah,
So we got a
that's
lot of folks on the list.
And if you want to, I can speak and then we can submit the other statements as well
That'd be
into the record. Okay.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, Chairman Walters. Or do you need to call the next person up?
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Zach Carroll. I'm a junior at William Jewell College, and I'm here today to speak to the merits of school choice and education savings accounts and other tax credit programs like that. As a former homeschooler, I can attest to the burden that our tax code places on individuals who choose alternative schooling options. In the recession, my family could barely afford to pay both the state for a service we did not want and at the same time provide a quality education at home. This despite the fact that I learned better outside of the classroom and was as intelligent and dedicated as any student you could find in traditional public schools. For evidence of this and the quality education which alternative schooling options can provide, let me state the following. And much of this is true not only of myself, but of my sister and of my friend Jordan, who are also going to testify. In high school, I competed in 3 international debate tournaments in places such as Romania and the Czech Republic, representing Missouri citizens and telling Europeans about what Americans were like. Along with other Missouri homeschoolers, I reached the semifinals twice and defeated the official United States team, as well as engaged with students from Canada to Thailand and from Sweden to South Africa. I achieved a 35 on my first and only ACT as a sophomore. I volunteered at the Greene County Juvenile Office and received an award from the Springfield Bar Association for my work. I became a National Merit Scholarship winner, which, by the way, whenever they announced that, they put my school as Kickapoo Public School and not as a homeschooler. I also received full rides to Missouri State and Missouri S&T, as well as a full tuition scholarship to William Jewell College, where I now study political science in an honors program. I've competed on the Division II tennis team, which I was not allowed to compete on at Kickapoo Public School, even though we paid taxes. And I'm proud to say I will spend this upcoming year studying at the University of Oxford in England. As a testament to the benefits of alternative schooling, I ask for you to consider policies which will allow Missouri families and children the ability to choose a schooling experience which works for them, instead of being forced into one that benefits the establishment. I'm very grateful that I was allowed the opportunity to do this and that my family could pay for it. I know that many students within Missouri who would like these opportunities cannot afford them. So, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, thank you for taking the time to allow me to speak about the importance of offering families increased school choice options in regards to education savings accounts for Missouri students.
Thank you very much. We have Mary oh, not testifying, sorry. Is this Kara Killian? Kevin Killian, sorry. Having trouble reading. And can we have Dan Scott on deck, please?
Hi, I'm Kevin Killian. I'm the CEO of Good Samaritan Boys Ranch, which is a residential treatment facility just north of Springfield up in Brighton, Missouri. Appreciate you letting me come today to talk about the YOP and the NAP credits. We started using the NAP credits back about 22 years ago. At that time, we had 15 kids in our program. We had about 20 employees. Today, through the NAP programs and by growing our program, being able to utilize those credits, we have over 120 kids in our program, and we have over 100 full-time staff. All of these kids are kids who have been removed from their homes by the state of Missouri. All of my kids are from the state. I don't have any out-of-state kids. These kids have all been removed for their safety. Unfortunately, the residential contracts that we work with are preset on the rates that they pay us. We're not allowed to contract or to bid on their contracts. Right now, I know you've heard in the other hearings that average right now is between 20 and 40% that they don't pay the cost of care for the kids who are in the custody of the state. My number is about 38% that the state is short on our cost of care. The NAP credits allow us to generate donations from the local community to allow us to increase our facilities, improve our facilities, and in the last 3 years to help offset staff costs. Without those, it really puts us in a bind to be able to continue to work with these kids. You know, I would like to say that that these kids could find help and treatment in other places, but they can't. If they could, they wouldn't be placing them with us. And so all I ask is that you think about the impact that the NAP and YOP credits have on facilities like ours and on the kids in Missouri. And please allow us one tool to allow us to work with these kids on a daily basis. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And could I have Alan Casey on deck, please?
Mr. Chairman, distinguished panel, thank you. I'm here without notes just to speak off the cuff of the benefits of historic tax credits. There's many people in this room behind me that knows one of my latest projects easily meets the but-for category of the historic tax credit program. But I'd like to take an opportunity to look beyond the beginning genesis of that project, look forward to what that project has accomplished. 400 Place, downtown property as it's currently named, was redeveloped approximately 12 years ago for about $3.5 million in rough terms and utilized historic tax credits. Since that time, well, at this time, as a result of that investment, we have 20, it's a mixed-use facility. We have 20 full-time employees in various businesses in the building, 14 part-time employees, and 20 full-time residents in the building. And all these individuals are earning income, spending income, and benefiting the greater downtown, the greater of the city of Springfield, and of the state of Missouri. And if I were to peel back the layers of the project, that was a very difficult project in which we spent 8 months actually making sure the building would stand up before we then spent another 2 years renovating it. It would not have been possible without the historic tax credit program. Beyond just the income and the earnings spent from the people that now work and reside in the building also now has gone from providing about $2,000 or $2,500 a year in property taxes to benefit our schools and libraries to about $35,000. About a 15-time increase by the value of the investment that we've made. I'm not alone in that. This is just one relatively modest project in our rural downtown, but I think it clearly indicates between, as I've said, the income earned and spent, the property taxes paid, the benefit to the school system, the library system, the county services, all the various components of our property tax system have been a very clear benefit to our downtown and can only be multiplied many times by the many projects that have been completed in our downtown. And I'll conclude my comments there and offer to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Alan Casey, and could I have Frederick James on deck, please? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Again, welcome to Springfield. I am Alan Casey, and I'd like to discuss my thoughts on the case for historic revitalization incentives, the historic tax credit programs. My vantage point on this is as an architect deeply involved in historic development for the entirety of my career. I have experience in the quasi-public roles of serving as president of all three of Springfield Center City organizations, as well as this Chamber of Commerce as president, and I chaired the Missouri Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. As a native Springfieldian, I am intensely enthused for the revitalization of our center city, and I know its significance to the entire southwest Missouri region. Therefore, this evaluation of the true meaning and the impact of tax incentives is very dear to my heart. As both an architect and a redevelopment consultant, we have advised and steered clients through historic tax credit renovation projects in Missouri and Iowa, and are starting such work in Texas. We've been the project director for many projects involving HTCs, two of which, in fact, have made possible new homes for greatly expanded history museums. Another opportunity to enhance the cultural economic growth in our state. Our project development team brings together what I would argue are some pretty sophisticated attorneys and accountants as well. This is an extraordinarily complex process, especially when you involve the federal tax credits, historics as well. But our clients also are somewhere between ecstatic about the development opportunity made possible through this tax credit program, and yet fearful of the layers of the compliance challenges that the projects work out. I, like Dan, have developed two of my own projects in downtown Springfield, probably $4.5 million worth of investment right there. I want to just mention briefly one of our projects in Monette, Missouri. Was developed by a gentleman and his wife, Bob Berger. He's out of state right now, but asked me to share his comments. I've left the letter that he wrote. He's another client who developed a tax credit project, but stepped up to lead the charge also to put together a 40 building historic district in Monette. He stepped forward then also to buy 3 different buildings and combine them as a way to set an example of the renovation that should be going on there, bearing in mind Monette is another dream initiative city for the state of Missouri, an attempt to again encourage development. But Bob stepped up as a private developer, wife's a school teacher, private business owner, never developed an HTC project in his life, but went ahead and put $2.5 million into that project, which I would argue is just self-serving being the architect, but on the other hand, it's a beautiful, beautiful project. As you may know, we have a similar one going on right here in Springfield that ultimately is going to be a $20 to $30 million project right on the square for our history museum here as one of the tenants. Of course, for all of us who are collectively concerned for the effective utilization of our economic resources, much attention must be paid to the linkage and the accurate assessment of the impact of historic revitalization on the economic development of our communities. A special interest here is Springfield is regarded as the birthplace of Route 66, is the Route 66 Economic Impact Study prepared by Rutgers University. Two quick excerpts from that. In Eureka, Missouri, 20 to 30,000 visitors annually go to their visitor center. Off the highway, 80% from the U.S., 20% from foreign countries, mostly Europe, and are spending an average of $1,500 to $2,000 per travel party. Cuba, Missouri, one of the first small towns to align itself with Route 66 and get tourist attention. 10,000 visitors at least a year, and they're raising over $60,000 a year in taxes for their community benefit. We and others are now developing extensive plans to document as well as stimulate further the revitalization of our fellow Missouri Route 66 towns throughout the state through historic renovations for tourist-focused small businesses. Other studies point out, quoting, property values in historic districts have appreciated at a greater rate, were less adversely affected by the real estate crisis, and recovered sooner than even did housing. Employees in the knowledge fields of arts and entertainment, education. Okay. A conclusion. I remember when we as a country recognized the need to revitalize cities, came up with urban renewal, went in, spent tax dollars right and left, throwing it at local communities, ending up with parking lots and such. Instead, we got smart and figured out, let's let the developers spend their money and leverage them through these incentive programs like the HTC program. I assure you, if we can continue and in fact enhance Missouri's historic tax credit program, we will continue to leverage the developers to come in and spend their money and complete these projects and revive our center cities. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Frederick James, and then could I have Ryan Molney on deck, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Frederick James. I'm the plant manager of the 3M facility here in Springfield, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a few comments with you. 3M is a global company serving multiple industries worldwide. Here in Springfield, we produce adhesives and sealants that are sold worldwide. We've been a part of the Springfield community now for 50 years. In fact, we're celebrating that milestone this Saturday at our facility. As I look back over the past 50 years, we're extremely proud of our ability to bring good jobs with high wages to the area. And my company most recently has focused on growing our adhesive portfolio. That in the end, that resulted in a $40 million investment where we expect 90 plus jobs to be added here in Springfield. And that's in addition to the 300 plus that we currently have here in Springfield. Securing this investment secures the longevity of the Springfield site, as well as our contributions to the community going forward. But I will share with you that as a global company, 3M has locations all over the world that did compete for these dollars. And I think it's important for me to express that to you today. And it's safe to say that that decision would not have happened without several state and city level tax incentives, tax credits and incentive programs. In many situations like this, it's those incentives and tax credits that really and truly make the difference in terms of a return on investment for corporations making decisions around where they're going to invest significant funds into their facilities. This project was truly no exception, and Missouri Works definitely was one critical factor for 3M in making this decision. In closing, it's my hope that you consider the future of these programs as you consider the value, and I ask you to consider the value that incentives like the Missouri Works can offer for our economy. When utilized efficiently and properly, many of the state's tax credit programs offer great benefits, significant returns on investment, creation of high-paying quality jobs, and improved quality of life for many in our state. Do you have any questions?
Well, yeah, just one. So that's a process I'm familiar with, that competing for investment capital, different geographies, different jurisdictions. So I'm just curious if you could comment further. 3M is a great company in terms of thinking about the overall environment and all the pieces. And so you've focused on the credits, but I wonder if you could just comment that as you were going through your analysis and you were competing on behalf of Missouri to attract that capital versus other territories, what other aspects of the tax environment beyond credits came into that discussion and into that analysis, and did you sense was important in that overall decision-making process?
Specific to the tax environment?
Yeah, that might be my preference, yes.
I would say that overall I couldn't comment as to specifically if it weighed into the overall factor. I will share with you that the proposal that was put forth to our executives involved specifically what was in the Missouri Works program. Anything outside of that, I can't say truly made a deciding factor in that. Okay.
Okay, helpful.
Ryan Mooney, and can I have Beth Atchison on deck, please?
Good afternoon. Thank you all for your time. My name is Ryan Mooney. I serve as the Senior Vice President of Economic Development here at the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce. And for nearly 20 years, I've been part of the team working day in and day out directly with companies as they consider creating jobs in Springfield. Our bias in all of this is to bring jobs to the Springfield, Missouri region. I wanted to speak today in support of the job creation tax credits, most importantly, Missouri Works. Much has been said about this already here today, but I think it is worth reiterating that these tax credits are only paid out when jobs are created and are only offered when Missouri must be competitive to win deals for our state. Economic development is fiercely competitive among states, metro areas, cities, counties, and even between countries. Many competitive job creation projects come down to a small handful of locations that are seemingly equal based on workforce, infrastructure, location, business climate, tax environment, as you mentioned. Well-designed incentives are what can make the difference between winning jobs and continually being that dreaded runner-up. In 2013, our statewide coalition of economic developers worked to reform tax credits and supported the legislature's efforts to pass House Bill 184, which eliminated 4 tax credit programs: Missouri Quality Jobs, Enhanced Enterprise Zone, Rebuilding Communities, and Development Tax Credits. They were replaced with a streamlined, accountable, effective program known as Missouri Works. This program and other remaining job creation tax credits are intentionally structured to be used when we need to be competitive and carefully designed to ensure Missouri is creating quality jobs for its citizens and generating tax revenue back to the state at a level that exceeds the benefits provided to the job creators. As you look to make recommendations on reforming the tax structure in our state, I'd encourage you to support these credits that directly help us create jobs and return money to the state coffers. Thank you. Yeah.
I guess the question I would ask on that is, over the course of all the town hall meetings and all the discussions, lots of analysis about for how when the state invests in these programs, all the money that gets back. So we probably heard 4 or 5 different rates of returns. Now we get 1.4,
Sure.
1.7,
Sure.
1, and a trillion to 1, and all these ratios that we get, right? One of the things we don't usually pause to ask is it's always phrased as the return to the state. But even if any of those numbers are right, those returns aren't to the state. They're to state and local governments, right? Because included in that 1.4, that 1.8 or trillion to 1 is property taxes, the sales taxes, there's the local piece and all those kinds of things. So the question I've got, I guess, is, and I thought you'd be particularly able to talk about this, is when the state invests, both the state and the local governments benefit. do you think the balance is right between the investment that's made by the state and the investment that's made by the local government, considering the fact that they both get returns?
Yeah, and that was part of the Missouri Quality Jobs Program and is built into Missouri Works, where there has to be some local participation. In fact, I think Frederick in his mention of the 3M project is a really good example. Locally, we went above and beyond our normal policies to make sure that we had a competitive package here locally, and our council approved nearly $5 million worth of incentive. We used $1.6 million of state tax credits. So we had a much more of a local benefit that was part of that package to make that a part. And I personally, I believe that should be part of every economic development package, is the locals participating as much as the state. And we've even included that in some of our local programs that were designed to mirror state programs to make sure that it's everybody's participating.
Okay, helpful to you, thanks.
So, you said that Mo Works is only offered when Missouri needs to be competitive. There's a 3% entitlement portion to it, though, correct?
Right, which is not a tax credit, it's a retained withholdings.
Okay, so retained withholdings benefit that goes to the company. That's real money we're talking about, right? And there's 6% that is 6% of payroll that is discretionary.
Correct.
Okay. How do we know it's a but-for cause? Let me give you an example.
Sure.
Express Scripts had a large Quality Jobs Award, and I understand we slapped a new name on the Quality Jobs Act, and we made good changes to it.
Right.
But Missouri Works is the Quality Jobs program.
Right.
So Express Scripts gets $20 million in Quality Jobs benefits. How do we know it was a but-for cause for Express Scripts?
You know, each one of these projects is different, and so it's hard to kind of cast a wide net and define all of them. Each company is going to place different value on different things that are important to them as a company. Our job as an economic developer is to get in there and work with that company and find out what it is specifically that we need to do as a state and as a community to make sure that their decision is for Springfield, in my case, and for Missouri. Sometimes that's just about demonstrating that you're committed to doing whatever it is that they need to do. So sometimes it's mere customer service. Other times there's a spreadsheet that's involved that has dollars and cents involved from the company's decision. And it may not be that that company is trying to make that decision based on solely on profitability and how much money can we make. It's a decision on where is it best for us to make that investment. And I'm not necessarily here trying to defend corporate profitability. We're trying to do what we can do to be competitive as we can to win those jobs for Missouri.
And I'm not asking you to, but put yourself on the other side of the table.
Right.
Say, I work for company X that is considering adding jobs in Missouri. And I know that if I claim that there's competition between the state of Missouri and I say, well, we're looking at Kansas and we're looking at Oklahoma, right? Isn't my job for company X to extract as much value as I can, to make as much value for company X and its shareholders as possible?
Sure.
And what I'm going to do if I work for company X is I'm going to say that but for this tax credit, I'm not going to expand jobs in Missouri. So I can put the screws to the local economic development people, I can put the screws to the state economic development person, and all of a sudden there's an award of tax credits that I have used. I've done a great job as an employee of company X saying that it's a but-for cause. And then a politician gets to hold a press conference and have a press event that says, oh, this created the jobs. When in fact, those jobs may have been created there anyway. And I use Express Scripts as the example because Express Scripts, so much of a percentage of its physical plant and intellectual property and its employees were already in Missouri, right?
See, I'm not intimately familiar with that project, but
let's assume you've got a company that has 90% of its operations in Missouri. Isn't it very likely that even without quality jobs, if they're considering expanding, they're going to expand
at their base?
Let me use a local example. I don't know that it's exactly identical to Express Scripts, but O'Reilly Auto Parts, Fortune 300-something company, is headquartered here in Springfield. They merged not too long ago with a company based in Phoenix, Arizona. As the local, you start to get nervous that there is the potential that they can make that decision after that acquisition to move their corporate headquarters somewhere else. So if there's anything that we can do to encourage them to make that physical plant expansion, add those jobs and a head count, and further root themselves in our state, we're going to fight for it.
And I appreciate your job, because but it's sort of a different role on this committee and in the state legislature, looking at what's the greatest overall. You have a toolbox.
Right.
And if a company claims we need this tool to stay here, your job is to try to get them that tool.
Right.
So,
and our job is also to represent the areas that we represent. Our peers at the State Department of Economic Development are very conscious of trying to make sure that they are accountable for those tax dollars, those tax credits that are issued on a project. And many times we do the same thing here locally. We have to make a good case to our governing body. In this case, with the program that we were using for 3M, it was our city council. And we had to sit down with city council and say, what are we all as a community comfortable in doing? How far are we going to go to make sure that we win this? We found a level that we felt was comfortable, and it's a balance. So every project is not a matter of let's give them everything. We always want to make sure that there's a win in it for the local government, for the state as well. So that balance is part of our role as economic developers, and it's not easy.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, timekeeper.
Beth Atchison. And can I have Matt McCauley on deck, please?
Good evening. My name is Beth Atchison. I'm the Executive Director of CASA of Southwest Missouri. CASA serves children in our community and across the state by serving abused and neglected children. And oftentimes we think of these children or children that are in foster care as entitlement programs. But I would like to bring to your attention that legally, according to the federal government, these children who come into foster care are considered victims of crime. And that is their legal status. And so when we're talking specifically in the state of Missouri about the Champion for Children tax credit, we are talking about a tax credit that affects directly children of crime, no one else. We're talking about 3 different types of organizations. It's CASA, Child Advocacy Center, and then Crisis Nursery. So here locally, that is Isabel's house. And the Champion for Children tax credit allows us to leverage community support by accessing local donations and local volunteers. For all of us, most of our money comes from local donors. For CASA, that is over 85% of our funding is local. We are not funded through the government. We do not receive those types of benefits, and so it comes directly from the volunteers, whether that be in time or in money. And most of these donations come to us in gifts of less than $5,000. So we're talking about middle America helping the children in our community. And as we continue to look here in our community here in Springfield, when we have over 1,025 children who are in foster care just in Greene County last year alone, again, victims of crime, then we continue to look at the benefits. So if I were to put it into more than just the cost of lives, I would say to you, when we're talking about this return on investment that was mentioned earlier, for CASA specifically, for every dollar spent, it is a $24 return to the state, because we save the state $24,000 for every CASA volunteer that is assigned. And that is just in foster care costs. That doesn't count our guardian ad litems and our other state employees. So I would just ask you to consider not only the economic value of Champion for Children tax credits, but also the value that we have on the lives of our children.
I support your credit, even without the math.
Thank you.
That goes on, the funny math. There's a lot of funny math in these programs.
Thank you.
Not singling out
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Mac McCauley, and could I have Cheryl Schmidt on deck, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. My name is Mac McCulley. I represent the Missouri Baptist Children's Home along with my wife and our vice president for the Missouri Baptist Children's Home Foundation. Just wanted to speak briefly about the benefits of tax credits. First of all, for the donor, it allows us to receive a reduction in taxes owed to the state, as well as giving a charitable contribution deduction on federal taxes owed. For the children's home, the tax credits appeal to children's home donors, which enables our development officers to encourage donors to support the ministry that we do. And then for the state, the Missouri Baptist Children's Home provides care for children at less cost than it would cost the state in a non-faith-based care facility. And so that's briefly the points that I would like for you all to consider.
1,001 return. Thank you very much. Cheryl Schmidt, and may I have Stephen Kleinsmith on deck, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and committee, I'm Cheryl Schmidt. My husband and I are from Marshfield and serve as the Families for Home Education Executive Directors. Families for Home Education is a statewide homeschool organization which has been educating homeschoolers, the public, and government officials since 1983 concerning home education. My husband and I have personally homeschooled our 4 children beginning in 1982 until the last one graduated in 2010. As a result, we are committed to the benefits of alternative education, especially home education. Home education gives the parent the opportunity to tailor their child's education to the child's unique abilities. They can advance more quickly or take more time to thoroughly understand the concepts. The child is able to focus on their individual interests, therefore creating interest in learning. As the FHE Executive Director and FHE Region 6 Director, I spend many hours helping parents know what is required of them to homeschool and directing them to the resources they need to accomplish that goal. Many of the parents I speak with could be greatly benefited by the tax credit funded education savings accounts which were introduced this legislative session by Senator Koenig. I talk with a number of parents of children with IEPs or withdrawing their child from the public school system desiring an alternative. Their children are in need of special services or specialized curriculum which, if funds from a tax-funded education savings account were available, would be enable these parents so that they might be able to afford the education alternatives their child needs and that the parents desire for the child. Mr. Chairman and committee, we would respectively encourage you to support tax credit funded ESAs. Thank you for your consideration.
And I'll be sure to tell Senator Koenig that you expressed support for his bill. It was also a priority for the governor, and we appreciate you coming out.
Well, thank you.
Stephen Kleinsmith, and could I have Patrick Ishmael on deck, please? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on tax credits. Missourians invest $500 million a year on tax credits. In fact, as you may know, and I'm sure you do, Missouri gives out more in tax credits than we invest in corrections, mental health, Department of Transportation, and early childhood education. Some, maybe many, tax credit programs are beneficial. Others have grown to the point that they are having a significant and detrimental impact on the amount of state revenue available to fund our public schools and other essential services. In public education, where expectations for excellence continues to grow at the rate much faster than our state funding, our school districts will see a reduction in state money for transportation services. Our colleges and universities will see a reduction in their operating budgets, and some of our nursing homes will see a reduction in the reimbursement rate they receive from the state. Please know that I am not advocating an elimination of the tax credit program. just the inefficiencies and/or those no longer worthy of our continued investment. Although I am advocating for a thorough investigation of facts based on results of this exploration, we should be willing to fund a reallocation of some of the millions of dollars. Even if a sliver of $500 million is reallocated, this modification would go a long ways in public education and/or other worthy entities. Former Senator Jason Crowell recently stated, "We live in a world of limited resources." This leads me to one of my own beliefs. In Missouri, we have enough money to do just about anything we want to do, just not everything. These limited resources that we speak of force us to prioritize the needs and interests of a difficult job, but one that we can handle by taking them through the appropriations process like other important state investments. We don't need to raise taxes to provide the additional revenue needed to invest in our state's priorities. We just need to take a good hard examination at our long-standing ways of doing business when it comes to tax credits and reallocation, and reallocate some of the massive amounts of money the state invests on our behalf. In conclusion, if tax credits seem out of line to you, then I urge you to commission a complete review of the Missouri's tax credit program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Patrick Ishmael?
Good evening, honorable members. My name is Patrick Ishmael. I'm the Director of Government Accountability at the Show Me Institute. My colleague Patrick Toohey, who is our Western Field Director, is also here tonight. He's an expert in local tax policy. I think one thing that we should probably consider before the night is over is the impact of seen benefits and unseen costs. When we talk about tax credits in particular, I think that's very important to consider. When we spend $1 million in tax credits on a private country club in St. Louis County, for instance, that's $1 million that can't go towards education or infrastructure or health care. More broadly, we took a look at this in 2011, and between 1999 and 2010, there were about $2.3 billion in tax credits issued. If you break that out across the state by person, that's about $400 per person. And if you look at it at the county level, you find some pretty interesting results. Of the 115 counties in the state, about 5 received above average per person. So St. Louis City, for instance, per person received about $3,000 in economic development tax credits. And economic development tax credits are the issue that we're interested in. We're not really interested in benevolent tax credits. We'll leave that to the legislature to decide which ones are valuable and which ones are not. And that doesn't mean that we're against all tax credits. Earned income tax credit, for instance, is one that we support. But when we're talking about economic development tax credits, it was a little surprising to hear so many leaders from the Greene County community talk so favorably for the economic development tax credit system that we have, because when you look at how those tax credits have been distributed, at least over that period of time, and I'm sure it probably extends to today, Greene County received about half as much money as if you had just basically cut everyone's taxes instead. And so for folks who receive the tax credit, there is certainly a benefit. For those who don't receive the tax credit, who could have received a tax cut instead, who could have taken that money, saved it, put it into their own mutual fund, created bought another fryer for their family business, they are negatively affected. And that is why the unseen costs have to be considered here. Tax credits largely have been found to be enormously inefficient when it comes to actually bringing economic development. And the points made earlier about whether a company would have come to a certain place or whether development would have happened but for the tax credit is an important question. I think that's a question that is, as you consider revisions to the tax code, definitely worth considering as you look at reforms to tax credits, but also looking at tax policy more generally. We would love to have been able to talk a little bit at greater length about tax issues that we think are important, but I know we are on a limited schedule, and I appreciate your time.
Mr. Chairman, we are at 6 p.m. on the dot.
What are our options?
I was told we have a hard stop at 6.
Hard stop at 6.
About 15 more minutes.
Okay.
Okay, we have, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have 15 more minutes.
Then, I don't want to hear from anyone. If there's
someone here with, I don't want to talk about facilities or quality jobs or wild.
And I'll just say something for the record. I'm willing to literally stand outside in the parking lot, talk to anyone who wants to talk about tax policy for as long as it takes, for what it's worth.
So they've given us the 15-minute warning. If you plan to talk about historics, we've heard maybe 50 people in the 4 sites. So I would ask that you give the time to someone else if you're on this list. YOP, NAP, same thing, and you guys are going to be just fine, YOP, NAP. I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but I'm pretty sure if it's going through the House, it's going to have my okay, and YOP and NAP are just fine. So with those caveats.
Zimmerman? Okay. Colby Collins? And could I have Melissa Boyd on deck?
Members of the Commission, thank you for extending the time. I'm privileged to be able to speak. My name is Colby Collins. I'm a local business owner, own several different businesses here in the Springfield area. I'm one of probably a few people in the room that have been the recipient of both the tax credits for charitables and for businesses. And I come here with that unique perspective and say that in general, I think we need to widely review business tax credits and narrow that gap a lot. I don't believe it's providing the economic benefit that we've touted it to do. I look at specifically, as the Show Me Institute kind of indicated, the lost opportunity cost. When we take taxpayer money and we give it to a business, we would have inevitably spent that money somewhere else, or the taxpayer would have spent it. So there's an opportunity cost that is actually lost that is not calculated in these. And I just applaud the governor for setting up this commission to look at that and to analyze that. I appreciate that, and I encourage you to do due diligence to determine which ones actually benefit our state, have a net benefit, and those that don't. And put those that don't on the chopping block and get rid of those things. So that's kind of how I look at the business side of it. On the charitable side, I say almost the more the merrier. Okay, now that's a little bit of an extreme statement there, okay? But I do believe that specifically you talked about the NAP or the YOP, the pregnancy resource, a wonderful thing that literally, I think, saves the state millions of dollars from birth weight babies and babies that go to the NICU, and just saving lives. Man, that's important. And that's something that we can't put a number on. Champions for Children, the CASA thing, and other types of things. There's literally, when we look at the fact that our money's immediately doubled, okay, when there's a 50% tax credit, plus they put that with the volunteers and all those other donations that come in, we literally multiply our money many times. 24 was the number put there. I think it could be potentially much more. So I fully support that. My last thing, and then I'll be quiet and let someone come up here. ESAs. Big proponent of ESAs. The bills that were given this year talk about for special needs children, for children of the military, children in foster care. Those are great starting places to be able to give parents and guardians more choices to they do with their tax dollars. And I think there's wonderful options there. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for doing your due diligence and considering these programs. And thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Boyd?
I'm sorry, I thought it was a sign-in sheet, so I...
Oh, okay, no problem. No problem. Kelly, and I can't read your last name, but you're from MSBA?
Hopkins.
Sorry.
That's okay. Not your fault, so I write it.
And could I have Michelle Marsh on deck, please?
Sir, I'll decline since I'm with maternity tax credits. So
Okay.
I'll spare your time. Thank you. Okay.
Could I have Patricia from the Community Partnership? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. This is very short and sweet. I have a little different perspective on this commission and what they're doing, and that is that we talk about, we just got up here and talked about it was great saving lives, and it was great. I look at this from more of a 10,000-foot view, and that is, I think the first thing we have to determine is the primary purpose of our taxes, and then the purpose of our tax policy. To what extent is our tax policy overall designed to fund the programs in our state, and to what extent do we use it to promote, and you can call it whatever you want, socially appropriate programs, good works, social engineering, that one's a little loaded, or public health, etc. But you can't just start with, we're going to have tax credits, they're going to be for some things. You have to determine what part of our policy and how much of our policy and the primary purpose of our policy is before you can actually determine where not to get money. That's my perspective.
Your perspective?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michelle Marsh, or you decline, I'm sorry. Patricia Jonas Argel. On deck, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Patricia Duck. I'm with the Community Partnership of the Ozarks. I oversee community and neighborhood development there. We are a local nonprofit, and we focus on building resilient children, healthy families, and strong neighborhoods. We do that through more than 35 different programs, from early childhood prevention, early childhood education, substance abuse and violence prevention, affordable housing and homeless prevention. So today I'm here to support the affordable housing tax credits. So we have partnered with various developers over the last 7 years to provide support services and programming at MHDC developments here in Springfield. We've been able to offer educational classes on topics such as effective parenting, financial literacy education. We've provided opportunities for residents to get to know each other at social events to increase safety and cohesion and that sense of community within those developments. We have provided a fun and safe place for kids after school. And this is all possible due to the unique nature of these developments. They are designed in a way that allows space and dedicated staff to provide the programming activities and events. Safe and affordable and decent housing is so important to those in our community that are under-resourced. So this includes families, the elderly, individuals with disabilities. There are those in our community that are living on very fixed incomes. If these developments didn't exist, these individuals and families, they could be living in a home that was unsafe, unhealthy, or the worst case scenario, they could be homeless. These developments, they do more than just provide safe and affordable housing for people who truly need it. They also create that sense of community. So it's a place that people can feel safe, connected, and they're provided the support they need to remain stable and be successful. So I just urge you to continue tax credit housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonas Argel, and then could I have Maverick Taylor, please, on deck?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Jonas Argis. I'm the Executive Director of the Taney County Partnership, and our role is to serve as the economic development arm for all of Taney County, serving Branson and the other cities and villages. We do many things, including business retention and expansion, business attraction, and marketing, but tonight I want to focus specifically on workforce development. The last few years, the Branson market has seen considerable recovery. We've had record numbers as far as tax receipts, and seen increased development with last year roughly $360 million in development, redevelopment in the Branson market. Now with that, as I mentioned, workforce development, 2 years in a row we've done a workforce survey where we are about 1,000 people short of jobs that are available. And once we start peeling back that onion and looking at ideas and challenges to fill those jobs, it's either talent attraction, talent development, and if we're looking to attract folks for those jobs, we come into the next layer, and that's affordable housing. We are very deficient in workforce housing and affordable housing for our folks that could work if they could get to those jobs. Without going into other things, I just want to touch on a few. Recently got in touch with 3 developers that had done 5 MHD housing projects in the last roughly 8 years. And 2 of those developers told me that but for the programs through MHDC, they would not they would not have done those developments. And they represent over 500 units of affordable housing that is now available, one of which is at 97% occupancy. Another senior housing development has 94 units, and they are currently at a 75 waiting list of qualified applicants to utilize that housing. So I'm here to speak just from the workforce development side that in support of housing tax credits to serve that need for us, because right now, currently, the biggest threat to the continued growth and success of the Branson tourism market is workforce development and the ability and the availability of labor. And so, another thing from a tax revenue perspective, there's only a handful of counties in the state that generate more sales tax than Taney County, and there's a little over a dozen more municipalities in the state of Missouri that generate more sales tax. So I think we do quite a bit to pull our weight for what we do in Taney County. So with that, I would stand for any questions or comments. Thank you for your time.
Alder Taylor, and then could I have Billy Schutchman on deck, please?
Hello, my name's Maria Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of Catholic Charities of Southern Missouri. We serve the 39 southernmost counties in Missouri. 8 of the 10 poorest counties in the state are located in our coverage area. We reach out and we provide hope, but more importantly, our services change lives. Our focus is on working with families one-on-one and individuals one-on-one to help them move towards self-sufficiency. So with that, I just want to say, of course, we benefit from NAP tax credits because that allows us to serve these rural communities that we otherwise would not be able to afford putting in services. We also benefit like I said, from the NAP tax credits, but more importantly, the leverage that was mentioned earlier, the opportunity to use volunteer hours and as well as donations to leverage dollars to serve more people is critical. I do want to mention one other important point, and that is last year we put in our first housing application through MHDC, and we were partnering with the developer to provide supportive housing and low-income housing for seniors in a very rural area in the state. We were not able, our application was not chosen, but it was a critical need in that area. And I'm just saying in southern Missouri, in these rural counties, there is very little low-income affordable housing. And so the tax credit opportunities that come through MHDC and partnering with the federal tax credits allow agencies such as ours to not only fulfill our mission and provide services on site, but also give families an opportunity to have safe, affordable housing. With that, I thank you, and we appreciate that you're here with us today.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have 23 people left on the list. It was suggested that perhaps we get a show of hands of how many would still like to speak, and then we might be able to extend it a little beyond the 15 mark if the committee would like us to do that. That's my life. Could I have a show of hands, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay,
Can we do it?
I think we can get it done. We have just a little bit of time, so everyone has to go real short, and I apologize. So,
Yeah, I'd certainly like to hear as many people as possible.
thank you. Yeah, actually, if you all, everyone who wants to still speak, if you could start forming a line real quick up here, then we can get as many people in as we possibly can.
Good evening. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Folks, sorry, this lady's trying to present testimony to this committee.
Good evening. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Millie Shookman. I'm the development coordinator at Isabel's House Crisis Nursery of the Ozarks. I just wanted to take a couple of seconds to echo the sentiments of Ms. Atchison earlier from CASA. We are beneficiaries of some really great tax credits, so I'm going to keep this really short and sweet. But as a crisis nursery, we help children whenever their families are in crisis and make sure that their families are stabilized so that we prevent child abuse and neglect and keep those families strong. So these tax credits are very important to us. They help us attract new donors, and they also help us encourage our current donors to give larger gifts that are going to make a bigger impact and help us to help more children and families. So we would ask that you consider pushing for these tax credits to stick around so we can continue our mission and continue leveraging the wonderful support of our donors to keep making positive change in the lives of about 400 children each year right here in our county. Thank you so much. Any questions?
No, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Come on up, next person in line.
Good evening, Austin Walker. I'm the Manager of Government Relations at the St. Louis Regional Chamber. We're the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development organization for the St. Louis Metro region. Come here today to ask that you favorably recommend an earned income tax credit for the state of Missouri. We've looked at tax policy. We're looking at what's good for the state of Missouri, not just urban. This is urban and rural that we're talking about, and it's going to help over 500,000 people, our poorest people in the state of Missouri. It's going to lift people out of poverty. It's going to boost the economy, improve educational outcomes for kids, and it's just smart policy. It's bipartisan. We think it's supported in Jefferson City. Governor has voiced support for it, the pro tem, Speaker of the House. It's a smart thing to do. It passed the House last year 115 to 35, I believe, and we just hope that you'll favorably consider that this year.
Yes, excellent points.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you.
Next person in line.
I've got some photos that they told me to bring through. I'm a small business owner. I'm Mike Freeland. I drove here 6 hour round trip, so I appreciate you guys staying
Oh, good, yeah.
a little bit longer to get this. I'm an entrepreneur. I know what it's like to make decisions, and I applaud the governor for putting the commission together, and I don't envy the task that you guys have. I'm representing Harrisonville, Missouri, and Cass County. They are the county seat, and somehow their courthouse miraculously survived the modernization in the 1950s when most of the courthouses have been torn down. And there was 55 buildings empty in downtown Harrisonville with no economic life for the past 30 years. We took a risk, and the numbers did not work out. The bank would not loan the money for the building because it took more money to renovate. But we took a calculated risk. We just got done with the renovation 6 weeks ago. It would not have even been started if the historic tax credits were not in place. I'm sure, like every program, there's people that need more money, and there's probably abuse and all that as well too. For our situation, the project would have never even started. Since we started this project 2.5 years ago, there has now been over 30 buildings sold in downtown Harrisonville. The community, we've started a wedding event space. Most of the bride and grooms that we are booking have lived in the area and have never seen any economic life on the square whatsoever. And there's been 5 ribbon cuttings now in 2017 in Harrisonville. There was another couple that bought a couple buildings, and they found, like we did, it was kind of a money pit. For us, we found part of the wall that the structural engineer even missed that probably would have ceased the project because the building was probably a couple years away from collapsing. So I'll just speak from our standpoint, saying that we were appreciative that the program was there. We took calculated risk. The numbers wouldn't have worked out without that, and maybe we were foolish enough or smart enough to make the investment, but we've seen already economic life in the area, and I'm not going to give you any phony or projection tax numbers or whatever it's going to produce. Just Harrisonville's appreciative that we're there, and once again, we want to say that in our case, the rural communities especially need those tax credits to save those buildings. So,
Beautiful.
thank you.
Can we have the next person, please? Back, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Shelby Butler, and I work here in Springfield at Skill. It's an independent living center, and we serve people with disabilities. We serve Springfield and 8 surrounding counties. I am here to support the MHDC housing tax credits. We have lots of good stories to share, and I'm sure if you wanted to know more, we could, let you visit some of those people and they could tell you how happy they are in that housing situation. But I did want to mention one thing that hasn't been said is that it's not only affordable and safe, but it's also accessible. We're helping people transition out of nursing facilities. We're helping people stay independent, living in the community. Some of them are working, some of them are able to be productive, and they live with their families. And without this accessible housing, they would not be able to do that, and they wouldn't be able to be safe. A lot of times the developers that are building these are going beyond the HUD required 5%, which is hardly any units at all when you have even like a 300-unit apartment complex. Some of the developers are stepping out of that box and even going with universally designed housing, which means that anyone could live there for the rest of their life. And we're seeing people are really good tenants. They're learning how to, take care of their lives in their own homes. So we just want to ask you to look at those really seriously and support those any way you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the next person, please?
Thank you. My name's Mike Singer. I'm a director of gift planning for Great Circle, Missouri's largest provider of behavioral and mental health care in the state. So we have statewide presence, and we have been a longtime user of Missouri benevolent tax credits to the advantage of being able to now operate 6 campuses across the state and an additional 25 properties and counseling centers. We're serving over 30,000 children and their family members a year now, and in large part, the gap between what we receive from state funding for our programs for foster care, case management, and managed care now, the gap is always there that we have greater needs than what we have. We fill those through charitable donations, and we are always very graciously accepting of benevolent tax credits because they play an incredibly important role. So today you guys are going to be hearing a lot of different things. You have already, and you're differentiating in part already between economic and social and benevolent tax credits. I would hope that you would keep that division there. Although I'm going to say that you're going to see a blend, because when you talk about economic development, you have to recognize the long-term role that social services in Missouri play. Because what we are doing is we're preparing for a future generation of people who would otherwise be unable to take care of themselves. And that is a cost, that is a potential cost to the state of Missouri that is incredibly more than whatever you might be saving through a reduction in tax credits. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Hi there. My name is Stacy Jurado Miller, and I am a permanent supportive housing developer in Missouri. Because of the state affordable housing tax credits, I've been fortunate to work with nonprofits to create permanent supportive housing for homeless veterans, youth aging out of foster care, survivors of domestic violence, and individuals with disabilities. Today, I think a lot of the arguments for and against tax credits have been framed in terms of numbers and budgets. And I think it's very important that we conclude tonight by looking at a different set of numbers, and that's the numbers of men, women, and children in our state who would literally be sleeping on the streets if not for the state low-income housing tax credit program. When Governor Greitens formed your committee, he said he wanted to fix the system for all, not just the well-connected. I have a very pragmatic request today, and that's that instead of cutting the state LIHTC program, you work on fixing elements of it. Most states utilize a point system in order to determine what housing applications will receive LIHTC credits. Missouri is one of the few states that does not do that. By implementing a point system, you could provide greater transparency and eliminate the possibility of personal connections and subjectivity influencing the funding process. A point system would ensure that the LIHTC program in Missouri rewards the most impactful developments, maximizing the financial dollar and best utilizing the program. Former Treasurer Clint Zweifel used his position on the MHDC Board of Commissioners to create a set-aside for permanent supportive housing and to advocate for the creation of special needs housing. As a supportive housing developer, I'm very concerned that with Treasurer Zweifel no longer on the commission, of who is going to step up and be that advocate for the special needs groups in Missouri. And I think all politicians want to say that they want to help homeless veterans and they want to help kids in foster care. And permanent supportive housing and the state low-income housing tax credit program is a tangible way to do that. And so I appreciate your consideration of the state low-income housing tax credit program, and I think there's many ways that we can strengthen and fix the system here in Missouri without eliminating it. Thank you very much.
Just as you're walking away, because we don't have time, and I want to hear from as many people. So I understand your point system comment. This is what I want to hear. I think I speak for us. How can we improve these programs? How can we make them more efficient? How can they have a better impact in producing the results they set out to produce, funded by the citizens of Missouri? So if you've got other things that, if we had time, we'd talk about it, please provide them in writing, shoot them to Brian. I'd really love to hear them.
I will email.
You're one of only 3 LIHTC proponents in the 4 town halls that we've had that's had like an actual proposal for reform of the program, and we just really appreciate that it's constructive and helpful.
Well, great. I'll email some specific suggestions from other states that we work in that make it a lot more transparent and easier for developers, better for the state.
All right, that's really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Farmer, and I am Executive Director of Harmony House, and thanks so much for staying a couple extra minutes, or much longer, to hear from all of us. I will try to be brief. Harmony House, out of necessity, has become Missouri's largest domestic violence shelter. We shelter over 700 individuals annually. We provide 3 meals a day, clothing, case management, child care, life skills classes, and more, all designed to help these individuals and families break the cycle of violence. And over the last 3 years, we have utilized and benefited from 3 different types of tax credits. We've utilized the AHAP tax credits to renovate and construct a new shelter facility that added 62 beds. We did that out of necessity. We were turning away over 700 individuals every year who needed a shelter bed, and we didn't have it. So the AHAP tax credit helped us. We leveraged $3 million in tax credits into over $5.4 million in donations to help us build our new facility. And I'm quite certain that without that AHAP tax credit, we probably would not be in our new facility today. We would probably still be fundraising. We also have used the LIHTC tax credits. We've partnered with the Facino Group and are in construction to build affordable, permanent, supportive housing for domestic violence survivors. Finding housing is one of the greatest challenges that our case managers have when residents get ready to exit our shelter. And we're just a 90-day shelter. So our whole focus is to get these folks ready to move into independent, lifestyle, a nonviolent lifestyle. And so, with that's 23 units, we will have 23 units of affordable permanent housing set aside just for domestic violence victims. And again, without LIHTC, I think that would still be a pipe dream. Last but not least, every year we receive domestic violence tax credits, as every domestic violence shelter throughout the state does. And again, we use our $145,000 worth of tax credits this year to generate over $220,000 in contributions, which is about 20% of our budget. And without that tool in our fundraising toolkit, it will be much more difficult to raise the funds that we need to provide this incredibly important and much needed community service. Domestic violence costs our nation over $8.3 billion with a B dollars annually. And without agencies like Harmony House and all the other nonprofits that benefit from the benevolent tax credits, there would be much higher costs to our communities and to our state. So I really encourage you to do what you can to maintain the benevolent tax credits, and to do what you can to improve the housing-related tax credits so that these tools remain to help address some really severe societal issues. So thank you for your time.
Hello, good evening. I'm Sean Whitney. I'm a partner with Spencer Fain. I'm a tax credit attorney. I represent developers that do deals across the country. I get the opportunity to work in multiple states, and earlier I think it was mentioned that Missouri wants to be best in class, and I can tell you from a state tax credit program, speaking specifically to the historic and the low-income housing tax credit, we are best in class. Oklahoma, Georgia, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, they all have modeled their tax credit programs to a degree after ours. I am very supportive of the programs. Obviously, I'm probably not the most objective, but I will tell you I do have some ideas that we can help make the programs better. With regards to the historic credit, there's a prohibition of nonprofits using it right now. What that does is that eliminates school systems and local municipalities from redeveloping their buildings. It's been difficult. As you know, there's a lot of abandoned schoolhouses now that are still on the books of local school districts. It's very expensive for those to maintain them when they're not operational. I've been involved in 7 different projects where a developer has been able to, by hook and by crook, to acquire title to those buildings and rehab those buildings and put them back in service as both affordable housing, commercial office, and market rate housing. Right now, I think that's a huge benefit to our school systems. It gives them, one, a large cash infusion, and they're no longer a drain. And I've been involved in projects, Cape Girardeau, Joplin, Springfield, Kansas City, St. Louis. These credit programs don't just benefit St. Louis and Kansas City, although I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. They benefit everywhere in the state. They also are really the only tool to incentivize a developer to go in, and lowering tax rates doesn't do it. So with that, I'll excuse myself, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot. Brian.
Great firm, great firm.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Jeff Seifert, President and CEO of the Branson Lakes Area Chamber of Commerce and CVB. Jonas R. just took a lot of my talking points, so I'll make this brief. Bottom line is, what sets every project apart, frankly, is local participation, and we stand behind that in Branson just as Springfield and many other communities do. When it comes to low-income housing tax credit program, their development costs in Branson are higher than many other communities across the state, and when it comes to the greatest threat to continuing to drive tourism in the state of Missouri, at least in Branson, it is affordable housing. If anyone would like to see what non-family sustainable housing looks like, or non-sustainable family housing looks like, I'd be happy to show you what that looks like in Branson and how we're trying to deal with it. So in the ecosystem of workforce development, the critical piece of the puzzle continues to be low-income housing tax credits. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So the next person, please.
Just one page there. Thanks a lot. Okay, my apologies. There's only one page there. My name's Jeff Neal. I'm a contractor developer out of Joplin, and I'm here with the Mayor of Joplin, Mike Siebert, and City Planner Troy Bolander to speak on behalf of historic tax credits. This is a map of Joplin's downtown. There are 12 projects currently being developed that would not be happening if it weren't for historic tax credits in downtown Joplin. That's $22 million in our small city. And there's also a round of additional projects that will be encouraged by historic tax credits. The map you've got before you shows the planned projects in red. The green stars are already successful projects that have used the historic tax credit program, and the yellow lines are the current historic districts downtown. These projects won't happen without historic tax credits. In our small town, it's one of the few development tools that we have. And I work with small cities around southwest Missouri, Sarcoxie, Webb City, Carthage, in which these towns do not have other tools in their development tool bag to bring investment into blighted downtown areas. Without historic tax credits, these areas will continue to be blighted, and that's something we haven't talked about tonight, is the avoided costs that are actually avoided when you allow historic tax credits to encourage revitalization. Because what happens is the buildings fall down. The cities continue to be blighted. We're currently redeveloping a building in Joplin that was on the city's demolition list for 7 years. And it was due to be torn down. However, using brownfield tax credits, historic tax credits, property tax abatement, entire slew of things, we've been able to do something there that's going to be quite spectacular. It's the first green redevelopment project in Joplin. We're encouraging smarter redevelopment in urban cores as well. Often the greenest building's the one that's already built. And I'd like you to consider those things as you move forward. And please continue the historic tax credit program. If you can make it more equitable for the small guys out there, we'd love that. But as it is an equal access tool. If you're a small building owner in Sarcoxy, Missouri with 1,300 people, but you've got a historic district downtown in your square, you have a way of improving your downtown. And that's what historic tax credits have allowed many, and we encourage you to continue the program. Thank you.
I think if we hurry, we can get everybody in line in. 6:45, we gotta stop, so.
Good evening. Thank you so much for extending the time for us to speak. My name is Dara Eskridge. I am with Urban Strategies. Urban Strategies is a national corporation. We work with developers who are developing mixed income communities to support the families that reside in those units that they are developing. In Missouri, we support roughly 6,000 families. In St. Louis, right now, we have a large project under the Choice Neighborhood Initiative, which is a federal initiative. And so I am here to speak in support of the low-income housing tax credits and to honor your desires for us actually speaking. I will go straight to how we can improve the LIHTC program. It's already been explained that it is necessary, but here's how it can improve. One, that you only honor LIHTC rewards 2 projects that are already part of a larger comprehensive plan for neighborhood development, so that you know that it is not just an island project. It is something that will contribute to a larger scale community improvement plan. Secondly, that LIHTC can only be used when it is leveraged with other public and private resources, and that LIHTC does not make up the bulk of that financing package. Third, that once LIHTC is awarded, that it must be supplemented with full service wraparound supportive services that include an individual and family development plan that clearly works with the residents to outline where they want to go in the future, so that they can move from no longer being a low-income family, but being at least moderate income family. And the final point is that you require developers receiving LIHTC and their supportive service providers to, in very real ways, concretely quantify the return on investment for that LIHTC, so that we can then report it back out to the broader community to show this really does work. This is a true investment in the state's economic growth. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Ma'am,
Excuse me.
ma'am, I know you're rushed. If you could email those to me, it'd be fantastic.
Good evening. Thank you for staying. My name is Randy McCoy. I'm the Director of Housing Programs for the Kitchen Incorporated here in Springfield, Missouri. The Kitchen Incorporated serves primarily homeless individuals and families and is a community housing development organization. In the last 5 years, the Kitchen has completed 3 LIHTC programs providing over 112 units of affordable housing to individuals in the community. As a nonprofit developer, we use the special set-aside program, and we use homeless individuals and individuals with developmental disabilities as our target population. Why is that necessary? Because every night in the city of Springfield, hundreds of individuals are sleeping on the street. We have over a 25% poverty rate, and the number of individuals who are paying more than 50% of their income is incredibly high. And so for us, development of affordable housing is the best way to, number one, reintegrate individuals exiting homelessness into a mixed community where they are beneficial members of that community and have a long-term housing stability option. Number two, to prevent homelessness in the future by keeping individuals who have a low income from becoming homeless because of they can't afford market rate rents. I'd like to throw in 2 quick comments about things that have been said earlier this evening. Yes, tax credits take away available revenue from other programs and projects that might fight crime, help provide childhood education, give money to mental health or physical health issues, etc., etc. There's very few things that I can guarantee to you, but one thing I can guarantee to you, that not one of those issues, not mental or physical health, not childhood development or education or crime or any of the others, are benefited by individuals being homeless and living on the street. In fact, it's just the opposite. Every one of those conditions is exacerbated by homelessness. While we do not have concrete data for the city of Springfield, comparable cities in Oklahoma, in Illinois, and in Florida indicate that a homeless individual or family costs the community between $10,000 and $20,000 a year, and those are in cost and services like emergency rooms, police and fire, and emergency services, and through the shelter and other programs in the community. Second, what was this? The second one was something. I don't know. Second. A question was asked earlier about a historic building is there, but for the historic tax credit, wouldn't somebody else just come in and redevelop the building? Maybe. But what I can tell you is that the kitchen would not have developed any affordable housing, or especially 112 units in the last 5 years, without the low-income housing tax credit program. What's more important, though, is not whether the units would be developed, what happens after the units would be developed. Yes, we have had 3 projects funded to the tune of about $15 million. And while a for-profit developer could have come in and built the same number of units in the same locations, the economic benefit on the front side of the project would be the same. Jobs would be created, supplies would be bought, materials and taxes would have been paid. On the back side of the project, however, in a community like Springfield with a 25% poverty rate and people paying above 50% of their income in rent, the for-profit developer with market rate rents would create or add to the problem of people being trapped in situations where they couldn't afford their rents and possibly becoming homeless, where in our projects the LIHTC subsidy helps buy down the rent that actually makes these units affordable to individuals. Also, the for-profit developer would not, in any circumstance, create a situation where they would target individuals who are homeless or have developmental disabilities or other special needs categories to bring into that development. The profit margin that they need can't substantiate that. You want a suggestion? Make it bigger. Not 30% set aside, maybe a 50% set aside. You want to really make it successful? Look at ways to link the LIHTC tax subsidy to other tax subsidies that allows nonprofit developers and other organizations to tie support services, including workforce development and other projects, to that LIHTC project to allow those individuals who are transitioning either out of a poverty situation or a homeless situation to become higher paid members of the community that can sustain housing on their own.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. We got 2 left. 3 left. I think we're just introducing 2.
Dan Shaw, Missouri Grocers Association. Thank you very much. You guys are doing a great job up there. We spoke last week. Director, you had some questions about our increased internet sales, how it's deferring local sales. I want to remind the committee and those here that we're concerned about a box of mac and cheese being bought at the neighborhood store should have the same tax implication as a box of mac and cheese that's bought from some other source, maybe the internet, maybe it's delivered by drone or whatever. It should be taxed the same way, and that the tax collection allowance that we receive in the state for the grocery and retail industry does not cover our costs. And with that, I have 2 retailers here today. Chuck Murphin, who has 4 stores in the area, and Larry Gare, who has 2 stores, and I'll defer to them. Thank you.
You can actually get me mac and cheese by drone.
We finalized one of the committee's recommendations.
Just 2 quick points. Again, this is Chuck Murphin with Murphin's Market. We have family operates 4 stores here in the area. As Dan mentioned, two main points: the equitable sales tax between online sales versus brick and mortar. Big concern of ours as our industry has seen that changing like many other retailers. And then the sales tax collection allowance, a 2% sales tax collection allowance. As grocers and retailers around the state, we are doing the work of the state in collecting those sales tax revenue, and as a part of that, there are costs associated with that. By itself, the credit and debit card fees cost more than that 2% for those transactions. That's not counting all the training that takes place. That's not counting all the additional software updates that are involved. It's not as simple as putting a flat percentage in a point of sale system and taking care of it. We're dealing with edible food, different taxable items, so there's a lot more involved to it. It costs us much more than that 2%. So that's our main points. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's good. Yeah, thanks.
And I'll be even quicker than that. I'm Larry Gayer. We've got 2 stores, one here in Springfield and one in Crane, Missouri. Just to, in addition to what Chuck had just said, one of our big concerns in this brick and mortar thing is that we're both small family-owned businesses, and we're in areas serving this community. And I know Chuck, as well as us, we step up to many more needs than just selling mac and cheese or whatever that is. But the streamlined sales tax, that's something that I think that there's a large amount of money out there that I'm not even sure that anybody can put their finger on that we need to bring into the state, and we don't need to be in a disadvantage in these communities where we're, you can go out several states away, buy the same product and bring it in cheaper than what, you can buy it from your neighborhood grocery store. And, we're supporting the schools and we're supporting the fire districts and we're brick and mortar and doing all this. So we just ask that maybe more look into the streamline, and that would benefit everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I knew I had to. Thank you, Jim Farrell, and once again, just submitting a number of letters, support letters from various communities around the southwest part of the state, but also a couple of documents as it relates to best in class, what some other states have done, and we'd be happy to work with you later on some other efficiencies that we see could be very effective. And some was mentioned in CAPE as it relates to the time review and the money from investments.
Can I just say one other thing? Sir, I just want to really thank you for the organizational job that you and your people have done. I think it goes without saying that we've all learned a lot about the historic preservation tax credit in communities all over the state. You've turned out a lot of people to our 4 town halls, and I think that's a key part of this process, and I just really appreciate your efforts. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We wanted to just make sure that the pictures come across rather than just the numbers.
100%. Thank you.
Thank you so much.